build on this heritage by respecting and listening to each other, thinking clearly, being receptive to new ideas, speaking honestly and deciding wisely for the current and future well-being of those we serve.
Thank you, Councillor Tonkin. First item on the agenda is confirmation of the minutes of the last council meeting. Members, what is your wish? Would someone like to move those minutes? Deputy Mayor Eaton, is there a seconder for the minutes? Councillor Greaves, all those in favour? That's carried. There's no adjourned business or leave of absence. It brings us to my Mayor's report. Just a quick update from my Mayor's report is that I forgot to thank Deputy Mayor Eaton for stepping in at a citizenship ceremony for me last Monday. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I heard that you did a fantastic job. Thanks very much. Members, what is your wish? Would someone like to move a motion? Move my report. Councillor Jamieson, seconded Councillor de Graaf. Go to vote. All those in favour? That's carried. There are no presentations, so we'll move on to deputations. And our first deputation is for the Selix Beach Historic Motorcycle Classic event, and we'll be hearing from Brenton Matters. Mr. Matters, if you'd like to come forward to the podium. You're going to have to run the timer. Mr. Matters, if you'd like to come forward to the podium, you'll have 8 minutes and you'll hear a little chime when you have 2 minutes remaining.
Okay. Lord Mayor, councillors, thank you for having us here this evening to do this deposition on the Selix Beach Historic Motorcycle Races. Not a lot to say really. We've had 2 events so far. Both of those events we considered to have been very successful. The first one had a lot of unknowns, but our plan and our structure managed to put together a really good event, and we had a lot of learnings out of that event. Those learnings were then taken forward and put into our business plan and our risk management plan into the second year, which improved small things, not really large things. And then, of course, there are always learnings out of everything. So those have been incorporated into the current business plan and risk management plan. There's been one of the main things that we've done heading into this event is move the event on 3 weeks at the request of environmental for plovers and the risk or likelihood that there may be nesting plovers. So we watched March last year and picked a date in March this year and picked a date in March next year that we thought would be appropriate, and all parties agreed that that was a good outcome and a good move. So we do everything we can to protect the environment and make sure that we don't have an impact upon it. I think that's proven by the feedback that we get from local residents and rangers from the council, etc., with their comments about the beach is always cleaner when we leave than when we arrive. There is no impact upon pebbles or sand, dunes, etc. We fence and maintain security throughout the event to make sure there is nothing with that. And then in the clean-up process, we actually clean the beach. So anything, whether it's ours or it was previous, we make sure it's cleaned up and out of there. The event's been a huge success from a motorcycling point of view and from the competitors' point of view. It's been a very good success for the local community with the Surf Lifesaving Club and the money that they've been able to make, which will continue. Scouts running the car park for gold coin donations, local vendors, charity groups, etc., that we encourage to continue to come in, and we continue to support in the event. So we don't bring people in from outside the area. We try to have everything that's supplied into this event from the local area. We book at caravan parks, holiday homes. They're across, you can't get accommodation. In fact, you'll find now even people have booked pretty much out the weekend that we're heading for. So, so it's a large financial benefit to the community. It's a great benefit for us because we get to go and race motorbikes on the beach, which is a passion, and vintage motorcycles. That's pretty much where we are. So I don't have much more apart from what we've done in recent times.
Thanks, Brenton. I'll just go. Members, would you have any questions? Councillor de Graaf.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Just a quick one. Why is it referred to as a historic event? Does it go back to another event from years ago, or is it just because of the age of the motorbike?
No, basically it started in 1911. So it ran through to about 56, 57. So that's the main reason for it being historical. We only let bikes on the beach that are pre-63. The reason for that is the horsepower rates that they are. We only allow bikes to have road tyres, so no aggressive tread patterns or anything, which actually work better on the beach anyway. So it is very much a historical race. If you Google it, there's lots of stuff about that.
Councillor Olsen.
I'm on. Thank you for your presentation. Just regarding the letter from the Ordingo Washpool Working Group, they talk about restricting access via Button Road to stop the trampling through the washpool.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been addressed?
So the restriction of Button Road, there's no access through Button Road anyway. Never has been. So that letter, I think, was actually in the first event, not in this for this event. But I could be wrong there, off the top of my head. But there is no access through Button Road, so traffic is restricted. Parking. So we have in our traffic management plan and in our security. Certainly, there is no parking signs all over every road we don't want people to be at. We actually patrol those areas to make sure people don't park in any area that they shouldn't be, and we have security to stop anybody jumping fences and getting through. The only rule issue that we've had in past events is local residents that tend to be able to find a hole in the fence somewhere, and they're soon escorted back and made to get over the fence or through the hole they crawled. So we don't actually make many apologies for being pretty strict on what we do, because we want to continue to have the event. So if people want to be silly, then they need to be silly. So if you're good enough to crawl over the fence or under the fence to get there, you should go back to Stony Road.
Thank you.
There's no further questions, so thank you for your deputation. We'll be bringing forward this item on the agenda, so if you'd like to hang around, you can hear the outcome.
Thank you.
Our next deputation is in regards to the Whitten Bluff Base Trail. We'll be hearing from Mr. Nigel Black. Mr. Black, if you'd like to come forward to the podium, you'll have 8 minutes, and you'll hear a little chime when you have 2 minutes remaining.
G'day. You can hear me okay? Yep. Dear elected members and friends, my name is Nigel Black, a Port Walunga resident and representative of the Port Walunga Conservation Society, a group formed in 2013 after doing some environmental work with Katrine Hildyard. I'm speaking on behalf of that group, local residents and members of the research community concerning the proposed base trail at Whitten Bluff. We have engaged Katrine regarding this project and project leader Rob Bow in the presence of Mark Parnell, leader of the Greens, those on two different occasions. First, a statement from Ghana leader Miss Georgina Williams, who states, I do have serious cultural concerns of a spiritual nature with the proposed Whitten Bluff base trail, which has significance in relation to the Jilbrookie Dreaming Tracks and as such is protected under the provisions of the Aboriginal Heritage Act 1988 and the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Heritage Protection Act 1984. I've expressed this to the Council. I'm unable to make a deputation in person, but my urgent health matters are my primary focus at the moment, the welling of which will better enable me to continue in my decades-long effort to save the last relics, the ancient wisdoms, the law of the land, of the last open space places along the journey of the ancestor Jilbrookie, where he was carried, where he carried his dead nephew and cried his tears, leaving springs for the people. I had hoped to consult with other family clan members on this matter and to send a more detailed written statement in time for the deputation this week. We're not able to focus on such things right now. However, because of the sudden death of a family member, one of our young people, I support the motion of Councillor de Graaf calling for full background engineering and environmental assessments regarding Whitten Bluff to properly inform and extend period of consultation, and I support the top trail proposal. This is what I stated at the public meeting at Rotary Park when I first became acquainted with Nigel. The bike path should follow the roadside pathway at the top of the cliff. In conversation with the previous mayor, I was told that she also shared the view of the bike path going over the top of the hill. As I understand it, the top trail was being considered in respect to my concerns, and I have never been given any feedback to the contrary. Thank you, Senior Woman of Water, Georgina Williams. So statements of concern have been provided from geological, marine and conservation experts. Our aims, we support the Coast Park Trail to become more accessible. We oppose the base trail proposal in this fragile and sacred location. We are concerned about the lack of community influence. We underline that the base trail is not essential infrastructure. We are calling for conducting and sharing relevant assessments. We call for rerouting the design to a top trail. It would appease environmental, geological and cultural concerns. It would update the existing coast trail and finish upgrading roads, lookouts and pathways that are essential infrastructure. To do this, we are calling for members and community to review the nearly 17 years old decision to go for a base trail and to reconsider updating the existing top trail. This will mean beginning new consultations. We seek to protect the Bluff as a geological monument, natural sanctuary and sacred place. We also request you engage with the Coast Protection Board, who confirmed yesterday that they have not formally advised on this project. We have serious concerns about limited consultation processes. As stakeholders, we expected to be part of the discussion. However, we were never contacted to attend any meetings. The Have Your Say process asks for us to provide feedback from the community on the concept design. However, page 3 on the community engagement plan states there will be limited ability for the community to influence the design. The document states that it is to include consult active participation. However, the only participation possible is regarding artwork and signage. This seems to be misleading the community to think their concerns will be heard and can influence decisions. The decision to opt for a base trail in 2004 is outdated and does not represent current populist view nor global understanding of climate change. Whitten Bluff is a stunning geological monument. People from all over the world take full delight in what Port Noarlunga has to offer as a natural space. It has never been busier. Numerous council signs, top and bottom, warn of dangerous rockfall and fragility. For 70 years, geologists have recommended protecting this cliff line, now at further risk. Dr. Victor Gostin, geologist who studied Whitten Bluff, shares, as a concerned earth and environmental scientist, I understand that the current predictions of our climate include rising sea levels and increased storminess. Both these events would put the proposed coastal walkway under severe threat from collapse. A collapsed cliff would be an eyesore and impossible to rectify. The location of the proposal meets and crosses into the Port Noarlunga Reef Sanctuary Zone and the Environmental Marine Park. Both are within an aquatic reserve. Rob Bow shared that the proposal would take away the remaining beach in the embayment area protected under these zones. The design proposal appears to contradict objectives outlined in your 2020 development plan regarding coastal areas, primarily preservation of areas of high landscape and amenity value. Whitten Bluff is isolated from human activity. It is a safe haven for colonies of stingrays, Port Jackson sharks below, and cormorants, kestrels, barn owls and peregrines falcons above. Impacts upon the broader ecosystem is a fundamental concern. And the Marine Life Society of South Australia have offered some sharings there. Thank you. No design will be able to stop human behaviour from tempting the obvious risks in this fragile and dangerous space, and much of the site is hidden from view. The base trail proposal is not essential infrastructure. and as you have noted in your literature, it is dangerous, complex and costly. It is impossible not to have a negative impact on the natural environment. Port Noarlunga already has a coastal path. Port Noarlunga already has a central design feature, which is our famous jetty. The proposal is a double up on features and a double up on pathways. And a redesign of the top trail means you would achieve the aim of creating an accessible pathway between places and ensure the success of the coast park, but would avoid the destructive consequences of building in this fragile location. We support Mr. Graff, who has requested a motion for investigating a top trail option and encourage others to do the same. We ask elected members to revisit the outdated 2004 decision, and we request that you formally engage the Coastal Protection Board. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Black, for your deputation. Members, I'm just having a few little technical difficulties, so I'll be with you in 1 second to field your questions. And just while we wait for that to come back on, I just wanted to clarify for you, Mr. Black, that I think you're aware that there's nothing on our agenda tonight relevant to this matter, but November 17 council meeting will be considering the engagement report that comes back, and your feedback and comments and your written material that you've provided will be included in that. All right, we're ready for some questions. Councillor Jamieson.
Yeah, this raised a great deal of questions. I think we've consulted, we've got papers here, we've consulted with everybody, we've consulted with the Indigenous group, and, I don't accept that we haven't consulted. But I've got to keep that for later. But what I've got to do is, there's been an elected member request in that's been answered, and basically I'll just summarise that and then ask you a question if you don't mind. The path was built to facilitate construction of the original seawall built by the Coast Protection Board in the 1970s, between 40 and 50 years ago. So this likely started the idea to extend the trail to Port Noarlunga. Support has generated over the years. Over 1,000 people have signed the petition, 2 of them, considered as part of the coastal park vision. Now, given that we've been hacking into that area, that's the people, for 40 or 50 years, do you still believe that it's in the natural state in that area, pristine beaches and all these things?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question, Bill. And I understand you're very passionate about this project, and we have talked about it before with you. So there's no doubt about that. And I think everyone here that knows you would understand that that's your position. But I would say south from the end of the current rock structure that's been built, for what you were saying just a moment ago, south of there, that's where it starts to become natural terrain, untouched terrain. And even though there are some rocks placed at the front of that sedimentary space and now being put into the embayment area, they're basically the only things from the south of that point on the Port Noarlunga side. But there's been a lot of work done there, definitely. And you can understand why people would want to continue to go around the space. I understand that for sure, Bill. But our concern is that that is the last bit of space, and it is untouched and it is natural. And we think it's worth saving. We think it's the last little piece of the Port Noarlunga coastline that is actually where people can't go. And so that's it's pretty basic from that point of view. So to say that there's been work done on it to save the eroding coastline on one part of it doesn't mean that we can't respect and save the other part of it. I don't think that argument quite holds up. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't think that's what it was when even the length of time I've been here, that beach has changed a hell of a lot. And there's if you walk over the top, you'll see where there used to be buildings on the thing. But anyway, we'll move on. This one is a question: is the bike trail a walking path we are trying to have built? The existing roadside footpath on the top of Whitten Bluff is steep, narrow, and does not provide convenient access for many uses. There is not the width required, and that's the road reserve, to achieve 3 metre wide shared path to meet the objectives. The preliminary concept design for the base trail was developed in 2008, informed by studies and investigations into cliff stability, cultural heritage, coastal process and modelling. The path itself is actually set for people with disabilities, families, so that everybody can enjoy this environment we're talking about. So basically, you're saying you don't want a base trail, and we can't have a bluff trail because it doesn't comply. It can't comply.
Not yet.
No, you could if you then extended it out over the cliff face, which is never going to happen.
That's a design discussion.
Yeah, well, that's right. But then we have got designers. So,
Councillor Jamieson, do you have a question or are you
yep,
debating?
I'm going to just ask the question right now. So we can't have the base trail, we can't have the bluff trail. Do you want any trail?
No, that's not true. And as I've just stated, we are interested in the notion of a top trail. So there's an existing top trail, right? So you admitted that?
No, there's not.
There's not. There's no walkway that goes over the top of the bluff.
It goes, doesn't it? Go on.
Well, it's very clear. I've been walking it my whole life. There's a top trail. You can go and check it out after this if you like. I know you're a local, so am I. So what we're talking about for a top trail, we're not presenting the perfect design. We think that needs discussion and consultation, just like you would think, just like you have for the base trail. But we think that that's a viable consideration as an alternative. And as I spoke with Erin today, that may not be the alternative, but we thought if we come here with and we thought about a viable alternative, then at least we can look towards, other options, because at the moment there is no other option. And we think this is a viable option from a design perspective, from a cultural and design perspective. And all you need to do is put a little bit of thought into it and you'll be able to make something happen, and definitely not hanging over the edge of the cliff. That would not be the go, because that whole place is so fragile, as you know. Hence why you wouldn't want to put something underneath it. So there's a lot of problems there, Bill, as you well know, because you've been here such a long time. And we know there's been done loads of work along there so it won't cave in. So there's just the fragility is just ever obvious to anyone. And so we are talking about the existing trail or path that's there. We would try and find ways to make that function as accessible as possible. Yeah, we definitely.
Thank you, Councillor.
We don't deny that we would want an alternative. Yeah, for sure. Sorry.
Last one, then I'll go.
Final question, Councillor Jamieson.
When the base trail was put together, it was put together for all families, all people, people with disabilities, people, young people, old people, and one of the main, if you like, enablers of that is the gradient. If you go down someplace, you will see the gradient come up. That's the gradient for disabled people. That's the gradient for people in gophers and people pushing prams.
Is there a question, Councillor Jamieson?
The Bluff, I'm asking you, the Bluff trail doesn't fit any of those things. What about those families, the multiple uses of the trail?
Again, the alternative design that we're pointing towards would encompass those things as best as possible. I mean, we've got other places like Weatherall Terrace, Moana, plenty of places where there's hill climb and there is stigmas. So there are people in this room, there are designally ways to solve such problems on that particular hill face. There are ways to do it, Bill, guarantee it. It doesn't have to be the base trail, that's all. And I know this may not be what ends up happening. So, I think you can rest assured that your team will figure out the best way forward. I would trust that. I'm hopeful of that. But I can guarantee you there are designally ways to achieve what you want other than the base trail. Yeah, and I can get people to help.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I'll try and be respectful and not interrogate you. I have been around for 23 years too. I haven't actually seen any reports, so it's sort of thrown me left field having this tonight. And you mentioned lack of community consultation.
Yeah, so basically, and I don't know, I'm not saying it's intentional or we're not saying it's intentional or anything like that, but what happened was we were made a stakeholder in this discussion and we weren't contacted or have any sort of meeting, and we kind of waited and we thought that would happen. And maybe that's a bit on us because we didn't take anything further, but we did make the initial contact. We did request to become stakeholders, and then we weren't contacted. And that may, I spoke to Nick Carr, and maybe he lost my details or something. He's a nice guy. Rob's a nice guy. So things like that happen, but we weren't contacted. And when it comes to community consultation, there's a have your say campaign, but in the literature that you guys have provided, basically it says that there's a very strong limit to influence that the community can have because of risk and complexity. As Rob Bale will vouch for, this is this is the approach that has been decided because of the risk and complexity that there's a limit of community consultation. That's what Robert shared with us. Yeah.
In your letter, I'm sorry, haven't had a lot of time to read it, and had to scan it. You're talking about overlapping concerns.
Yeah.
Can you briefly outline that?
Sure. So there's environmental concerns, which is one thing. Social concerns in terms of what could take place in such a place. We've got problems to do with, even the literature that you guys have provided, or whoever provided it, that the place won't be accessible during winter extremes, which are quite common in that area. So there's, as we heard, there's Indigenous concerns, design concerns, and as mentioned, design process concerns. So all those things are sort of overlapping here.
And further, there, I guess it's a bit hard to ask you some geological questions or oceanographers with regard, and the Marine Life Society. Would I need to contact them to have details? Because
yes, they'd be happy to speak to anyone.
I'm not sure of your background as to.
My background is maybe to do with design and harmonious sort of design processes. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So
as a
got some homework to do, and it mentions with Georgina Williams has done a letter with regards to the Heritage Act and the Torres Strait Island Heritage Act. Is that actual? That is factual. That there is.
As far as I know, according to Georgina Williams, yes. I read that out for her. I haven't fact-checked her, so to speak, but I trust that that's what she would, that's her belief and that's her understanding, yes.
So have they, do you know if they've lodged
I don't know.
A complaint on that?
No.
Okay.
She's been a bit busy with family things.
And you mentioned, it was the marine life, the Port Noarlunga Reef Sanctuary Zone. Do you know much about that?
Just the way that it's sort of laid out, 3 crossing protection zones there, and they kind of all meet up right in that embayment area where the tide will go underneath the bridge. Rob and his team are planning to put there. So that's as we understand it, and the rest of the trail, sort of goes up against these protection zones, and Whitten Bluff itself, unfortunately, doesn't have the protections that many would argue that it actually needs. At the moment that we understand. Maybe other people did not.
So in the statement from the Marine Life Society, there's a link. So that would have the information and the contacts that I would need to
have some information there, and you'd be able to speak to the president, Steve and Paul. So all those people are available to speak with you guys for sure.
Yeah, I apologise. I haven't seen anything on the environmental side of it. It's only been the structural engineering. That's so. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Councillor Bray. No, press it again.
Thank you. Just a brief question, and I don't know if it's the right thing, but maybe staff can assist in answering it if you can't. If any significant work is done down the track on the top trail as an alternative, would be eligible for state government shared funding?
That's a very good question, and it's something that I believe even maybe Erin and I spoke about today. And also, it's one of our primary questions. We can't, I don't know if we can find that out, but you guys should be able to. We would hope so. We would hope so that if there was an alternative strategy and that it would remain, the funding would remain, you would hope so. I mean, it's just money, and it would be completing this section of upgrading this part of the coast trail path. So, I would hope so. I don't have an answer for that, but I would hope so. And it's definitely a question that we have wanted answered as well, because we would hope that the council would be supported in that sort of decision for sure.
Yeah. I hope this is not the wrong procedure, but can staff comment on that? Is that possible?
Given we don't have a matter on the agenda tonight to address on this topic, I'll ask that staff provide that information following the meeting. We need to move through the agenda. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks, Nigel, for your deputation today. You mentioned at the start of your presentation the guidance and support in finding your group from Katrine Hilliard MP. I was wondering if you've had any feedback from Katrine on this issue and if you've floated your ideas with her and where she's sitting.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a good question, Simon. It's probably good to catch up again with Katrine. I know she's here tonight, I believe. I might even speak with her in a moment. So that's serendipitous, but maybe not because everything's interconnected. I think, I'll catch up with her definitely. But originally when I spoke with her, she said, look, Nigel, the people have spoken and this is how it is. But that hadn't been approved at that stage or funded. And then she said, but I'm happy to offer you a place to talk. And so we did, and we caught up again and we talked with Bill and, they offered a space to share our concerns. We weren't as informed as we are now of the, I would say the shortcomings. But, and Katrine has, she was very, very strong in helping us with marine coastal issues and supportive. And so, I guess that part of me, personally is kind of like, this seems a little bit like the opposite. So there's a little bit of disappointment there, but definitely Katrine has been, she's been a very strong supporter of environmental issues, and I think she's a good person. But a little bit of disappointment around this particular project, but I'll engage with her again. That's a good idea. Thank you for that, Simon. And does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, thank you. Secondly, just a bit of a question around the timing of the deputation. Obviously, next council meeting, we've got this coming up on our agenda. Has that been relayed to you or what your thought is have coming to this council meeting instead of next council meeting?
That's another good question. And for all the elected members here and everyone listening in, it was suggested to us that there's an urgency regarding this issue and that things are moving very fast with the project. And for people that probably aren't in this room, also from the council had said, yes, it's moving very fast, so you need to talk to the elected members as soon as possible. And at first I was very nervous, but actually I found that the elected members are really good, normal people and approachable, so that's great. But I was really afraid, not that matters for my sharing just now, but sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. I started getting nervous.
That's right.
About being nervous.
I'm glad we've tricked you into believing that we're normal people. That's fantastic.
So it was advised by a number of people and parliamentary people as well to start the conversation early. So if Bill wants to talk further and have a cup of tea with him or whatever, because definitely don't want to. But personally, I don't want to put anyone out. I know Bill is invested in this project. It's been around for a while, and I feel for him, and I don't want to oppose him. I feel like we're part of the same community, and obviously this is a space where you have to sort of put things forward that aren't comfortable for everyone, and I apologise for that, Bill. And I know you're passionate about it.
I suppose just on that, just finally, I suppose we're talking a lot about Bill, but Bill is representing the views of his community as he is elected to do so, and through the community consultation, the overwhelming majority of feedback has come in support of it. What's your view on what the rest of the community are feeling? How do you balance your views of environment and the overwhelming support from the southern community?
1,000 people isn't necessarily overwhelming, and if they all understood the scope of the potential problems with this project, I don't think you would find an essential thumbs up. If there were concerns, people have a different kind of understanding of what they might tick. And so in this particular moment, the full scope of concerns are not understood even by the council, even by Rob Bale himself, who's a project leader, and that's a fact. So I think that if the council doesn't have a full scope or understanding of what the potential of this project could, the implications of that could be, I don't think you could think that the public could. I definitely, Simon, and agree with Bill as well, why people would like that idea and think it's something to get themselves behind. Definitely. And I can, it's not hard to imagine that notion, but here we're saying the location and the impacts of this particular structure, that's what's problematic. It's not the notion of having a path or wanting to walk around there. Everyone's going to tick that and say, cool, let's do that. But we're questioning and underlining concerns, and not just me, a number of experts are supporting this, and parliamentary figures too. So it's not just me, but that's basically the kind of consideration. It's not to say that they're wrong, those people, and that their interest is incorrect or anything like that. But if they had full scope and understanding of the situation, they you know, they would probably have a different kind of understanding of how to respond to that. Yeah, and same as the elected members here, who I've talked with, and they don't have a full scope of understanding of the situation either. So it's a little bit trying to say that people do have an understanding when the elected members and so on and so forth don't necessarily. So, and I know I'm not putting anyone down or anything like that. I'm just saying it's hard to ascertain, and I'll definitely want to speak with you guys more, and you can grill me. And yeah, I really appreciate your questions, though, Simon. They're really good ones. Thank you.
Councillor Greaves.
Should school myself. Thank you very much for your representation tonight. Simon stole my thunder just asking about Katrine Hildyard's and your approach to her. I think, you know, given that, you know, she was probably one of the champions of this particular project back in 2017 and came and gave a deputation with one of the local business leaders. I think that's important to note, and I would certainly hope that that support will continue. My question is really about the letter you read out from Georgina, and I guess I'm a little bit confused because I know that having been in this place for quite some time, I've certainly sat through a lot of the consultation and have read numerous reports about Whitten Bluff over several years. And my understanding, and certainly that's been confirmed by council officers, is that Georgina Williams has previously participated in an engagement and didn't have any concerns about heritage because there were no actual Aboriginal heritage sites identified. So are you aware of that? So I'd like to know, in your understanding, why that position has changed now.
Yeah, I can't speak for only Georgina on that front, and it's actually not prudent of me to do so. But I think if there's some seeming contradictions there, you'd have to engage and speak with her about that. And that's the best I can offer right now, because I wouldn't want to speak for her. I think we did at her place. But yeah, if there are seeming contradictions there or changes of heart, or like you're pointing to, then that would definitely have to be addressed. I totally agree. And on the front of engaging with Katrina Hildyard, you know, like I have, you know, a friendship with her, I guess. And I think that as far as the strongest interests I've heard in our community, it is actually business association interests, which aren't necessarily community interests. And I think just saying that Katrina Hildyard was here with a business figure, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's community vision.
I guess reflecting on Councillor McMahon's point, though, where there have been petitions, and certainly there has been very strong support from the local residents and from the business associations. Yeah. I think that does speak to the amount of support. So I'll leave that where that is. Just another question, again, why you've brought this here tonight. So I'm sorry, who actually suggested that this was critical and a matter of urgency?
Well, a lot of people. Yeah, so people within the council that I'd spoken to, people within Parliament that I'd spoken to. Yeah, so, you know, well, say Mark Parnell from the Leader of the Greens said, you know, you need to really speak, you need to share the concerns early so they can actually consider the situation a little bit more before the date where they decide. So that's what we followed that instruction, and from the Environmental Defence Office, the lawyers there as well. So this is a kind of, yeah, that's how that sort of came about. Yeah.
All right, no worries, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Councillor de Graaf.
Sorry, I messed the button thing up. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for coming in and speaking tonight, Nigel. I only first found out that you had your deputation planned a couple of days ago when you called me to talk about that, and I'm really glad that you're here. And the public is welcome to make a deputation anytime that they like, and I'd be really pleased if you'd like to even come back at the next meeting and make another deputation if you find then that you have more facts to present, or you've found more things that have come to light. So I do have a couple of questions, and if the Mayor will give me just a little bit of leeway here, I'll lead into them. Now, 1,000 people may have signed a petition, but we all would be aware that 1,000 people also signed the Let's Make Ranella Grape Again petition. So there are a lot of factors.
I'm just going to, I know you've asked for leeway, but I'm going to caution you that if there's a question time, it's not time for debate.
No, that's fine. Just whatever Bill had, I'll prefer to do the same thing. So the pathway does sound nice, but I think you're right that people don't quite understand all the different costs that are involved in that. And just to let you know that November 17th, I do intend to put a motion up, as you have spoken of. This will be hopefully to have the 2004 decision that was about the top path, to have that relooked at then.
Please move on to the question.
Yes, so my question is about something that you mentioned to me on the phone yesterday, and this was about the social implications of having a walkway that's going between Port Noarlunga and Christie's, and then potentially issues with the local hotels. So could you just tell everyone else what you told me about that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. People within our group have often pointed to the possible the social implications. I mean, we live in Port Noarlunga and Christie's Beach. Unfortunately, we have difficult social problems here, and there's a pub at one end and there's a drinking hole at the other, and nighttime activity between these spaces would have to be under watch or whatever, and you couldn't really do that all the time. So they're talking about I don't want to use words that are difficult to digest, but people acting out, lighting fires, hurting people, sexual predators, these sorts of things. So that was one of the social sort of elements that we thought was difficult. And of course, in the winter, you've got the problematic conditions there with the winter time, and in the summertime, people messing around there. And I've grown up in Port Noarlunga my whole life, and summer doesn't go by without a stabbing. So and keep your shoes, because they're going to go too. So this is where we live. Everyone knows it. So and if you guys don't live in Port Noarlunga, that's what takes place there. And it's just how it happens. And so that's why those concerns were raised by our community members. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Pete.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Nigel, I hope you can hear me. Thank you for your deputation this evening.
I've got on you, mate. Thank you. I can see you.
Listen, one question relates to our phone conversation yesterday where you phoned me. My interpretation of what you said was that you were of the understanding that Councillor de Graaf was to be putting a motion tonight regarding your deputation. Is that correct?
That's it, and I think it got changed, or it wasn't a process that's legit with your council processes tonight. So I think that's how it got changed, I believe, or it didn't kind of function in terms of council processes as far as my layperson knowledge goes, Mr. Pete.
No, that's fine. Nigel, I guess in your deputation you mentioned your assessment of climate change and the effect of eroding away of Whitten Bluff, and council has stopped that erosion over the years with the construction of a seawall. My question, do you perhaps agree that the construction of a base trail incorporating a more effective seawall will offer further protection to Whitten Bluff from the consequences of erosion due to climate change?
So it's a really good question, Mr. Pete. I think that what's very difficult about that cliff face there is that, like I said, for over 70 years, geologists have it's a naturally eroding space, so it's going to erode whether we call it climate change or not is one thing. And then the acceleration of sea levels and all that sort of stuff. It's a really good question. We may have to think about other things, and the danger of things caving in there is quite relevant with that embayment area that looks like it's ready to go. The top of the bluff looks like it's ready to go. Things like that. So just then we're starting to say we got difficulties if we're putting a base trail under that situation. There's a lot of stress there, and that the cliff face itself, as a lot of people here may or may not know, I'm pretty sure Mr. Jamieson would know, that the substrate is a basically it's sedimentary, so it means it's been built up over years, and it is full of fossils. It's not entirely rock. You could not call it rock, and it wouldn't be hard to break off, and it's not hard to break off. And up from that, you've got a lot of clay, and then it crumbles, and it's quite beautiful. Like the colours and all that are just stunning. But it's a fragile area. But yes, to your question, there may need to be a longer term vision for what is actually taking place there. There are rocks all along there at the front on the north side, but on the south side, I think that it's a little bit the slope's not as steep as it gets along there. So, but right where it's peaking, that's where it's most dangerous, and that's in the embayment area and right at the top of Whitten Bluff. They're the areas that are most dangerous, I would say. Yeah.
Thanks, Nigel. Just one final one, and this always comes up with this sort of debate. You made reference to a number of, I guess, professionals that are saying this is not a good construction, this isn't a good idea. And of course, council has likewise many consultants and professionals who are saying, yes, this is quite possible and it is a good idea. And likewise, your observation that you've got politicians on board that says this is bad, and of course we have many politicians, in fact they've funded it significantly, that are saying, yes, this is a good idea. Where do you stand on all this debate?
Yeah. Look, it's interesting, and of course, I mean that's what it is. We're in the centre for having the discussion, and not everyone agrees on everything. But I think that the middle ground here is what we perceive is the top trail version, because we think that's it's an intermediate. It's not saying don't do anything, don't spend money, or we're not saying that at all. We really need the infrastructure there. We need that, like Bill mentioned, the path on the northern side there is not in good condition. Just like the lookouts along the whole Whitten Bluff, they're all in, you wouldn't say disrepair, but pretty close. So I think you're right. It's a discussion, it's a dialogue, and there are polar opposites. And what I am really grateful for is that most of the elected members are they can see that it's a ongoing discussion, and it's not easily sort of this way or that way. But I think if our main concern is about safety and about the environment, and we love the nature and space of Port Walunga, then it starts to put this particular project in doubt in terms of what's really possible here. I have no doubt engineers can build pretty much anything they want, but that particular place is problematic, and I think you can build. It's going to cave in, and I think that what your earlier question is that in time this place is going to collapse. And if you want to stop that from collapsing, you can keep putting things there, but it's still going to collapse. So I think that that's something that's a reality of that place, and so a base trail there means in 50, 60 years or whatever, they're going to be, the maintenance issues and all that sort of stuff, and we can't really predict what's going to take place when or what there. But I think with the top trail, if it's limited, if it still includes, like I would think that what Bill has raised about the those essential ingredients of an accessible trail to do with inclines and all that, I would think that if we were going to have a top trail version, that all that stuff would be included. And I would want to satisfy that for Bill and everyone else, and of course the community itself. So that would be my understanding. That would be how I would approach that. At the moment, that's just me without consulting anyone else. But I also, I think that that there are different perspectives. It's a special thing to have different points of view, because then we have the bigger view. If we have the bigger view, we can really understand the problem. If we only see one side of the situation, we have, it's like, we don't get to see the full scope of something, and we need to see the full scope of it more than ever with with the advent of climate change. I think it's just it's very concerning, and obviously the council has concerns about that too. But I'm sorry, I don't mean to take up too much time. Thank you, Mr. Pete.
Nigel, from that response, I take the observation really that even a top trail will erode away in time. That's the response you've now given us. Look, I look forward to seeing you next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Pete.
Deputy Mayor Eaton.
For your presentation. My question's in respect to the top trail. If we go down that option, the current footpath isn't wide enough. So we're going to probably have to make it 5 metres or so, which means that we're probably only going to be allowed to use one-way traffic on the top of the hill. So what's the general attitude going to be of residents and people living in the area, that if they can't go up and down, they've actually got to use a ring route?
Yeah, I think given the full scope of the situation in terms of the impact and the problems of again, if the base trail option was so problematic and the impact was not cool, so to speak, then we have to find ways. But I think it's a design discussion, but a one-way road, and I know what you're getting at, because once upon a time, so I've heard, this discussion's taken place, but we're in a different time and place, and I think the discussion can take place again, and so can the debate, and so can the discussion with engineers and other designers. There are always ways to get around these things. It doesn't have to be a base trail, basically. But yes, like Mr. Pete shared, he said, so the top trail's going to fall away, and then Mr. Jamison has a giggle. Well, actually, the problem is that the whole place is at stake. So we want to be able to construct a path that can exist for the period as long as we can before it really does. I mean, it could be 100, could be 1,000 years before that washes away. But I think it's a little bit of a throwaway comment. But at the same time, I understand what Mr. Pete's saying. And I understand what you're saying as well. I think 5 metres might be a little bit too much when it's already been considered that it only needs to be 3. But you know, extending these sort of comments out there make it seem like what I'm trying to propose is maybe less valid, but that's just not true. There are design options and we don't know exactly what they are yet, and that would be a due process would need to take place. And I think that the council would be able to do that because we've seen wonderful work done down at Wetherill Terrace. You know, the way that you've, even something as simple as putting the colour into the cement, it's a beautiful job. And I think that there are such options you could do down there. And yes, the people along the front, particularly on that Christie's Beach side, have to be negotiations. Like, I don't think it's the answer. I don't have the answer, but I think that that's where we're pointing towards. And that sir, is that's my answer for that one. But I you know, I also think your questions are absolutely valid, and you know, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Deputy Mayor, did you have any further questions? I think we might leave it there. You've done very well to stand up there for this long and field all those questions. Thanks very much for your deputation.
Thank you to all the elected members for your listening and your tough questions, because there needs to be tough questions around this, and we also need to be able to ask tough questions, and decisions deserve to be questioned. And I appreciate your time, and I'm definitely here to talk to any of you guys. And remember that I represent a bunch of people, I'm not just here for myself. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Our next deputation is on the Southern Women Matter campaign, and we'll be hearing from Leslie Sweetman and Jane Morrison from Zonta, Noarlunga, Southern Vales, and Miss Katrine Hilliard will be joining them also. Please come on up. You'll have 8 minutes, and you'll hear a little chime when you have 2 minutes remaining.
Thank you. I acknowledge that we gather on Kaurna land, always was, always will be, and pay my respects to Kaurna elders past, present and future. I acknowledge our Mayor, and I also wanted to thank Councillor Tonkin for giving notice of this motion tonight. I also just wanted to take the opportunity to offer my wholehearted thanks to each of you for agreeing at your last meeting to fund the shortfall for the Spirit of Woman artwork. I know that artwork will engender community conversations that we need to help prevent and end domestic violence. So thank you very much to all of you for doing that. With me tonight is Southern Domestic Violence Action Group Chair Diane Newton, local community leader Lorraine Ellis, President of Zonta, Noarlunga, Southern Vales, Leslie Sweetman, and Zonta Advocacy Chair Jane Morrison, who will speak with you about our community's need for a funded domestic violence prevention hub and the upcoming 16 days of global activism to prevent violence. Councillors, tragically, more than one woman per week is killed in Australia as a result of domestic violence. It is the leading cause of homelessness for women and in some cases constitutes child abuse. Gender inequality at its root cause persists, and it is urgent that we shine a light wherever violence exists, including here in our community. Domestic violence is relentless and without boundaries, occurring in every corner of Australia, but our response has no boundaries. It's up to all of us to do whatever we can to ensure that our community and families within it do not mourn another woman. I have women come to my office seeking support because they are unsafe at home. If they are in immediate danger, we connect them with police and crisis accommodation services who are excellent. If they are at a point where what they most need are prevention services, it is increasingly difficult to find the support they need. Our Southern Women Matter campaign is about ensuring that together we change that. It's been excellent to have Mayor Thompson involved in this campaign. We need Council to continue to speak up. The motion sets out 3 clear ways for you to do so. I really look forward to speaking out alongside you to prevent and end domestic violence, to ensure our community is one in which all women are safe and violence is never an option.
Thank you, Katrine, for that introduction. Thank you, Mayor Thompson, Councillor Tonkin and councillors for the time that you're taking to hear our deputation. I'll refer to each point with a short comment reflecting the background information you have received in your papers prior to this meeting. I am completing the brief presentation and Jane Morrison, our club's advocacy chair, will respond to any questions. Point 1, the Council, by its proactive support to date, has shown the Onkaparinga community a commitment for the elimination of domestic abuse. Could we please respectfully request your support for the Southern Women Matter campaign by writing to the Honourable Michelle Lenzik, MLC. Point 2, further to our initial point, the councillors continue this support for their programs by endorsing Mayor Thompson to speak and advocate on domestic violence issues on behalf of the council. Point 3, Zonta International is a worldwide organisation committed to equal rights and a life free of violence. This concept is supported by the United Nations Global Campaign of 16 Days of Activism held on November the 28th through to December the 10th. Zonta is not just relying on banners that we are looking at here, but also other activities that were involved. And one of those is requesting local bakeries to produce the orange donuts, the orange being the colour that we use in Zonta around saying no to violence. We are asking the Onkaparinga Council to fund and display 6 banners with a message against violence in prominent positions and locations. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to ask you to cast your minds back to the 1970s, the 1980s, and a few years after that. This region, as with other regions in Australia, was celebrating the establishment of primary health services. Our region here at Onkaparinga was one of the lead services and envied by South Australia, other services, and Australia's services at large. We had the winning model. We had a model where, in fact, women were supported in domestic violence and all the services collaborated and worked very closely together. The services that were established was Southern Women's Community Health Centre, what was commonly called Primary Health, the Village, and Shine SA. Now I'd like to move you to the year 2000. Just in the last few years, we have seen Southern Women's, with the stroke of a pen, disappear. We have seen the changes, the restructures of the Village becoming GP Plus, and then under Transforming Health, came under the medical model, which means primary health is not a significant factor. We have also seen Shine SA removed from this region. For women experiencing domestic violence, there is no specialised service that works with prevention and recovery service. Workers also recognise this and they speak to each other asking where they can refer women. This area is desperate to be able to support women, and we call on your attention to this matter. Thank you.
Sorry, short. I'm going to speak for Lorraine, who's just this moment decided she can't speak. Lorraine had a very good friend called Karina. Karina was a wife, a mother, and a friend to a lot of people in this area. She had been suffering domestic violence for something like 8 years. She tried and tried to get health prevention and crisis prevention here in the south. She was unable to get the help that she needed, and unfortunately, Corrine took her own life and left 4 children behind her. We are asking you, please, to endorse our role in trying to get services back here into the south. Thank you. And I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, ladies, for your deputation. We'll go to questions. Councillor Thamiliotis.
Thank you.
My question is in relation to, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but the lady in the green who mentioned about the lack of services. And I'm just looking at the motion and I'm thinking off the cuff here. And I know we're writing to Michelle Lenzing on the campaign, but we're not writing to Michelle Lenzing to say reinstate those services back in the south. Is that something we should be doing about getting more crisis services for women in the south?
We actually have crisis services. The model that the state government is currently working with is when a crisis occurs and police intervene, if a woman is seriously injured or her life is threatened, she then can receive a service. That is a very small percentage of women, thankfully, and the remainder of women, though, do not receive a service. So we are, as Southern Women Matter, campaigning for a service to be funded to support all those other women who desperately need counselling, education, support. We're looking at a holistic service.
And to go one step further then, how about, and if I need to do this another time, reinstatement of the Shine service that was located here?
Totally.
Okay, thank you.
And as far as I understand, the Onkaparinga region, we had Shine for a considerable period of time. And then I'm not sure about other areas, but I do know Shine does exist in South Australia, but not in Onkaparinga anymore. And that was desperately needed as well. So yes.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Yes, I've seen the demise of them all. Been around long enough. There was a women's shelter as well. Do we still?
A women's shelter.
We still have them at Christie's Beach and a couple of other locations?
Yes, we do. And at the moment, a lot of women are being put into motels. And in fact, there was one woman with 13 children in a motel room. Because there are so many women that need the services and haven't got them. The shelter's not big enough to take all the women.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that answer? For the women's shelter, which is part of women's safety services, there's one women's shelter here in the Onkaparinga region. There's 4 in the metro area. The shelters for the safety of women do not take women or support women who are from their local area. So for the women who are at high risk in the Onkaparinga region, do not come into our shelter in this region. They might end up elsewhere, or as Jane said, in motels or caravan parks, or asked to go to family and friends. The system is bulging at the seams. It's imploding.
Councillor Bray.
Thank you. And look, I apologise, this goes back to 2016, but I've got 2 questions for you. On the basis that statistically 1 woman is killed by an intimate partner or ex-partner every 9 days, and 1 man is killed by his partner roughly every 30 days. So there are probably quite broad issues involved here. 2 questions. Will the banners in terms of raising awareness of the problem of domestic violence be gender neutral? And secondly, in terms of improved counselling for the South, do you believe such a service should be available to all?
Thank you, Councillor Bray, for your question. The banners that we're proposing to put up, and we have had a talk with one of the council workers, and we're going with the orange colour, which, as Leslie said, is the colour that the United Nations use, and we are Zonta International has consultative status with the UN. So orange is the colour that they've asked for, so that's the colour we're going with. And we've asked the council to put Zonta and Onkaparinga says no to violence. We want it to encompass all violence in Onkaparinga, from bullying to domestic violence to any other violence that exists. And yes, we would like the counselling, if it ever comes back here, to be gender neutral.
Thank you.
Councillor de Graaf.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, ladies. I just want to thank you for coming in and speaking. Also just wondered if you could reflect on this. So with inequality being a root cause, there's also poverty as a root cause, which is, there's a series of complex issues that seem to be overlaying that ties back to things like low wages, high unemployment rates, low rates of social security benefits, hardly any suicide prevention services, and then virtually no drug and alcohol services at all. And with regard to having excellent accommodation and shelter services, most of the stories that I hear are that the services are actually booked out and people can't get in. And then basically you answered my question that Sandra asked, that most people are getting put up in hotels because, or motels I should say, and they're even cramped, and then the people can't stay in there for very long because once they've gone out they can't reuse the service again once they've left. So it seems like there's a lot of complex things going on here. So just good on you for getting in there and just making a difference anyway. Do you have anything to add to any of that?
Thank you, Councillor de Graaf, for your thanks. Yes, you're quite correct. Abuse in all its various causes. We haven't got into financial abuse, coercive abuse, any of the other things, psychological abuse, gaslighting as it's called. We haven't gone there, but there are a lot of complex issues. And as you say, poverty and homelessness, there's been a huge influx in the homelessness of women over 50. And we need to look at all of those. And Zonta has a program called Awareness to Action, because we were sick and tired of being told about all this abuse and not doing anything about it, and we are moving on it. Just another thing for the council, there are other councils in South Australia that are putting up the orange banners. Gawler Council puts them across the road in their main street every year. Port Lincoln puts orange lights on their silos and also puts up banners. So it will be a concerted campaign that we're hoping that you'll be part of. And we'd like to see, as I said, Onkaparinga free of violence.
Councillor Brown.
Subsequent to my question at the women's shelter, there used to be a women's shelter right by the police station. That's no longer there.
Not the one.
Right. Well, it's changed its use.
No. We're not supposed to tell you where they are. Or you're not supposed to know.
I knew someone that was there, and it was, okay, ideal to be near the police station in that area. Yeah. So, okay.
But no, there's not one near the police station.
Probably should be because they live in fear.
Absolutely people live in fear. And I can tell you from a Zonta organisational aspect, we have been asked by a social worker who worked for one of the NGOs in the area to say that there was a woman coming over from Victoria, because if the domestic violence is liable to end in a death, they do try to move them, as Di said, as far away from the perpetrator as possible. So they rang us and said, we've got a woman coming over from Victoria. She's got what she's standing up in and a 6-year-old child. Can you help us? And within 24 hours, we were able to get enough for that girl to go into a house and feed and clothe her child. So Zonta does do a lot of work in this area.
Yeah, and to Katrine, definitely, directly, I would strongly, is there any network with the police with regards to these instances? Because there are times where there needs to be a little bit better understanding of just keep away from each other for the rest of the night, and the wife's got her hair pulled out and dress torn and bruises, and that sort of thing needs some mediation.
So I think the thing we're focusing on tonight is the need for prevention services. As I said before, when a woman comes to my office in absolute immediate danger and crisis, we are able to connect them with Christie's Beach Police Station. And at particular times, I've spoken with Christie's Beach Police Station about particular women's needs and how they're being met. So that side of things does work. Obviously, there's always room for improvement. But what we're talking about tonight is for those women who come to my office or come to other organisations who are not in immediate danger, but there is a lot of violence violence of all of the types happening. We need a place where they can actually access prevention services, counselling, therapy, etc. The other thing I would say is that a number of years ago now in South Australia, the MAPS, or the Multi-Agency Protection Service, was introduced. And that is a great service. It's a service that makes sure police are working on a daily basis with Women's Safety Service, with Housing SA, with Child Protection, etc., to make sure that information about particular risk is actually shared much more easily and much more effectively between agencies so that women can be safe and supported.
And is there some sort of a process in the education department? Because when the kids have been brought up in that violence, it's very hard to separate later on in life.
In my view, I think that we need to do a lot more in that space.
There is, at the moment, we are still talking to police, as we do quite often, because anecdotally we hear that not all the police are receptive to a lot of the things that happen, but things are changing. They are definitely changing. And the other thing I wanted to say was that there is a program called Expect Respect, which is run by Zonta up at Mount Barker, where the children are involved in domestic violence. They make a calendar each year. They people come and talk to them, like Simon, I can't remember his name, the policeman that was involved in the standoff in the Barossa, who was hurt. He talks to those children and is a mentor, and Walunga Southern Vales Zonta is looking at this program as well to try and get it into schools. It gives the kids the permission to go back home and say to their parents, this isn't right, this isn't happening. But as for getting into schools, that's an issue. And I'm being, obviously they want to talk behind me, so I'll let them speak.
I just wanted to say really briefly, which I think is fantastic, is that a number of local high schools have actually really started to think about these issues. So, for example, Christie's Beach High School now, every year on or around the 25th of November, holds a really big event where all of the kids come together and talk about the need for them to speak up against domestic violence. They share experiences. And so I think that is a wonderful example, and there are beginning to be more like that, where school communities actually really start to work to engender the conversations that we need to have. Always more to do.
And just to add to that, back in the 70s, 80s and 90s, when we were alive and well in the Onkaparinga region in primary health workers would go to primary schools and secondary schools under the idea of education. They'd work with the teachers, but also work with the students. That's why I say there was a huge amount of work being done in that period of time. Now it's done on behalf of, or there's no coordinated approach with all the schools, all the students. It's just that if someone has an interest or the skills or the concern, then they might put something forward for education and support. But the service we are hoping for, we want a holistic service. And out of that also would come education, not only education of schools, but education and the support of research to workers in generic services, because we have Anglicare, for instance, and they're a generic service. They're not a specialised service in domestic violence, but they do some work to the best of their ability, and they do a wonderful job in Anglicare. But they need support. So the workers that are still around need support, and that's what we're talking about, having a holistic service.
All right, thanks, ladies. We'll have to leave it there. Really appreciate your deputation and also appreciate the work that you're doing in our community. So thank you very much. Okay, on to our final deputation for this evening. We've got a deputation regarding the Walunga Hill Climb, and we'll be hearing from Brett Williams. Sorry? Andrew Admiral, sorry. If you'd like to come forward, you'll have 8 minutes and you'll hear a timer when there's 2 minutes remaining. Where did I get that? Apologies for that confusion. Go ahead.
Sorry, Andrew Admiral, sorry about that. Thank you, Your Worship and elected members. Actually, I feel a little bit flippant now after a presentation that was so important and relevant to present for all hill climb. But anyway, thank you for allowing me to present on behalf of the 2020 Walunga Hill Climb, an event we're hoping to run again within the City of Onkaparinga region. This event continues to be a huge success, with the capacity field of 120 competition vehicles being filled within the first week of entries opening in 2019. The event is to be held hopefully on Sunday the 13th of December 2020, starting at 9 a.m. and should be finished by approximately 6 p.m. in the afternoon. The last few years, by having the competitors display their vehicles on the main street before they competed up the section of road, added great atmosphere to the whole of the day. It allowed competitors and their service vehicles to mingle with the crowd and also enjoy all that the local businesses in the township had to offer. We would like to apply for the following road to be closed by the event: Old Walunga Hill Road from Halston Lane to Meadows Road. The time that we would like to close this road would be from 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. on Sunday the 13th of December, if this meets the approval of Council. We would also like to restrict the speed of vehicles up High Street at our expense with the Traffic Management Company in control, to allow for the Street Motorsport Festival atmosphere during the event. This would be from St Andrew's Terrace to Hailstone Lane along High Street from 8 a.m. till 6:30 p.m. on Sunday the 13th of December. If Council approves our request, we will make every effort to run the hill climb with the minimum inconvenience to residents. Further to that, we will notify adjoining landowners in writing within 6 weeks beforehand of the event, consult with affected landowners when required, leave all control areas in a clean and tidy state, notify the police of the running of the event to obtain permission to close the roads under Section 33 of the Road Traffic Act, notify the emergency services in the area, place advice signs along all roads 4 weeks prior to the event to forewarn road users of impending road closure, advertise the road closures in local papers a week before the event. During the event, man the access points to these roads and advise users of the temporary restrictions and supply alternative routes. Affect the public risk assurance policy through Motorsport Australia, which includes $100 million of public liability insurance. We will supply a copy of the insurance certificate of currency. We will supply a risk management plan. We will supply the maps of temporary road closures. If a landowner that's affected by the road closure has an emergency during the road closure period, upon receiving notification, we will stop the event immediately and send in our medical vehicles, which have trained paramedics and fire marshals. If a landowner needs entry or egress during the road closure period, we will stop the event as soon as possible to allow for the entry and egress to occur. Regarding COVID-19 compliance requirements, we will adhere to SA Health requirements and expectations. We have a dedicated COVID marshal as part of the event team who will implement and manage the COVID safe plan. We have already had experience with the COVID plans with the processes and procedures that we put in place for the 2020 AGI Sport Adelaide Hills Rally that we have just run last weekend out of the National Motor Museum, Birdwood, and the controls were a great success. We are local people volunteering our time to run this event. We run our events to Australia's best standard and have medical and fire vehicles at the start of the hill climb course. We appreciate the consideration extended to us, and we thank you again for the opportunity to present.
Members, are there any questions? Councillor Bray.
Thank you. I just wanted a little bit of detail. I think your event sounds to me like it's better than most, in as much as I believe you just said that if an affected landowner, and I don't think there are many,
8, I believe.
Yeah, if an affected landowner does need, for whatever reason, but a reasonable need to leave their property in their own perception, that you will actually organise that for them during the event.
We have always organised that, yes.
Okay, well, I wasn't aware of that detail in the past, but yeah, thank you.
Councillor de Graaf.
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. How many spectators do you think you'd be getting there, roughly?
Very tough to tell because it's a free event and because we're based at the Recreation Park down the bottom. That's where we have our pit area. And because we're floating all the way up Walunga, and then we've got the car park up top on Harbour Road, and then you've got people wandering up and down the Walunga township. So there's no real control or understanding of how many spectators we have, because we're not a paid event. So people just flow in and out through the day. So I apologise, I don't have those numbers. We've never actually counted.
Yeah, would you propose to keep all the people 1.5 metres apart for the COVID safe requirements?
With great difficulty, because it is a 2.8 kilometre course, and because we have 7 flag points. The 7 flag points are to address the safety of the actual competition course. But people are people. They will be floating in our area where we actually do the start line, and in our area where we actually do the finish line, and in the controlled area where we have the recreation park, we do have those things in place, just like we did with just last weekend. And so that's the other reason why it's very, very difficult with the general public to control them when it is an open area. So
yes,
we'll do best effort.
Yeah, I do believe that most of the other events, like the City Adelaide Christmas pageant's been rearranged or cancelled, because when there's over 1,000 people attending, it becomes very difficult because it's a very high risk event then, and you still need to comply with the COVID safe rules of keeping everyone 1.5 metres apart. So how did you manage to do that at the Birdwood one if you've only got one COVID safe marshal?
No. We have a COVID safe marshal
in charge.
COVID safe marshal manager for this to implement the processes and procedures. With Birdwood, I think we had 40.
40, okay.
And then with then we worked with the National Motor Museum, and we had a baseline of how many spectators could come through the National Motor Museum doors, and then of course we had the Birdwood area up the back. Then with each rally stage that we had a definitive COVID plan for the start and finish of each stage. But again, in the middle, we have no control over that. So that's the sites that we have control over. We put in the COVID plan.
No worries. Good luck with your event.
Thank you very much.
There's no appear to be any further questions, so thanks very much for your deputation. For those of you waiting in the gallery to hear the outcome of your reports, they'll be up very shortly. We've just got a couple of quick items to get through, and then we'll address those reports in the same order that we heard the deputations. So the next item is 8.1, which is the Strategic Directions Committee meeting minutes. Members, what is your wish? Councillor Bray.
I'd just like to move an amended motion, please.
Do you have the wording there? If you'd like to bring that forward. Would you like to speak to that motion, Councillor Bray?
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. First of all, this in no way is intended to not approve the assistance to complete this project. However, for reasons somewhat unknown, even going into the detailed costings, the installation is getting close to the cost of the artwork. So, and when this first came to us at council, the question was asked, we were asked for support as councillors, which was given to the concept. And my memory is actually not that great, but I think it's good enough to remember that at the time the question was asked, do you want money from us? And the answer was, well, we don't think so. We're going to try and do it under budget or something like within the budget or something along those lines. So, yeah, when I got back from my brief break, I did chat about this to some people to some councillors who did wonder a little bit about this actually, about the size of these installation costs. With the sort of pressure from the people there on the night, it was kind of a bit hard, the feeling was, to sort of question it under the circumstances. But even after the deputation tonight, I'm either brave enough or stupid enough to be willing to say that this is council money. We're not knocking back the assistance, and although it's a small thing, I just treat it as it's just a case study in a sense of how we spend our money that just happens to have come across our desks. And I wasn't really that impressed with an accumulated total of 10,000 to put this in the park. And my thought was that council staff are working in reserves and parks every day and are pretty good at this sort of thing. And in terms of installation of artwork, which has been commissioned by council, have probably even had a bit of experience even on something so specific. So I'd just be interested in seeing whether this can be worked into council staff work schedules and to see what this might actually cost us to have in-house. And then get back to the project organisers and say, look, we're supporting your project, but this is community money. We'd like the same result, but we can save ratepayers a bit of money too. So I'd like your support on this just to help the process along and maybe try and save us a few dollars as we're trying to make up a $6 million deficit. Thank you.
Is there a seconder for the amended motion? Councillor Smiliotis. Go ahead.
My question's in relation to this motion. Is this achievable by council? Can council do this and still not bring the auditing back? But this has obviously come from a discussion with council staff, I assume. Can someone help me here and see that this can be achieved?
Tara Lee, are you able to come forward and answer those questions?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I believe some of this was explored in the development of the motion, so there should be hopefully an answer available.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. There's a couple of issues there. One is it's whether the artist is willing to have someone else install it, so we need to check that. And I'd like to assure members, and we haven't actually looked at the costs. We did, on the way through, have a brief talk to some other to staff around the installation. Looking at it at a precursory level, they didn't think that they could do it any cheaper. However, when it does come in-house, there is a due diligence process.
Okay.
So we go through the public art framework process, which you're familiar with. It isn't uncommon for community groups to come with us in art. We obviously have to take a high level of interest and actually control when it comes to us, because it's on our land. So we're responsible if it's not safe. So we need to look at all the risks. So we look at the risks. So it will go through the public art framework process. It will go to the public art project assessment panel, which includes staff from across the organisation and those who have the technical skills to make those assessments. They look at things like maintenance, safety, cost, public safety, where it's located, does it fit with the reserve? So there's a process that happens. So due diligence will happen, whether or not this resolution gets across.
And can I just confirm the amount that council agreed to? Was it 664? Okay, I will second this motion and just speak briefly. And it's not about what we voted for or what we're trying to support. It's actually to do with the costings and the due diligence, and I think a couple of things that many of us councillors stood for. And I think me in particular, I was a little bit shocked at the cost to install the artwork, but then again, looking at the size and the weight of the artwork, I guess there is more cost than I expected. But this actually came back as a question from Councillor Bray, but it hit a light bulb in my head because one of the committee members is on another committee that I'm on, and they raised it with me about ratepayer money being spent and the amount of cost. So I think it's about doing our due diligence, seeing if there is another way. This isn't stopping the project. The project is going to go ahead anyway. It's going to go in the same location. It's still going to be the same piece of artwork. which this is the due diligence that we're apparently going to be doing anyway. So this is just putting this into motion and seeing if we can get some councillors to support possibly finding if there is a better alternative that there's a cheaper alternative and better use of ratepayers' money to get this still installed. Thank you.
Councillor de Graaf. Councillor Greaves.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a couple of questions, and it might be that Tara might need to come back. Just to be absolutely perfectly clear, this is a project on council land, funded mostly externally through a $15,000 grant, not a grant of council, and it is being delivered by an external party. So the Spirit of Woman, Place of Courage, the public art project is being delivered by somebody totally external to council. Is that right?
So through you, Mayor Thompson. So the process is, yes, it's been developed totally externally by Spirit of Women, and they've attracted 16,000 funding, so 15,000 from state government and 1,000 from Rotary. The way that works now is that we need to send a memorandum of agreement between them and the artists that they've selected. They then gift the money to council, and then we invoice them for that money, and then we go ahead with our public art process and work through the due diligence process.
So that's what is happening now? Like that is the process now?
Well, the process, if...
So I'm not talking about if this gets up, I'm talking about what is the process actually now. So council will actually be delivering this project, as in terms of doing the actual installation, and these are
supervising it, yes.
And these, okay, so supervising, are these costings developed by council staff, or are they costings that have been provided to council from
Spirit of Women?
Okay, so the project management and administration, I'm assuming they've got somebody actually undertaking
So
that.
that's the artist.
The artist.
Who would look after the installation.
Okay, all right. And have council staff actually seen these costings, and what has been the response to these costings?
The council staff have had a look. So I talked to the public art officer today because the group approached her to see if they could find any other way to make it cheaper, because they looked at it and thought it looked expensive as well. But when she had a look at it, she couldn't see anything that we could do without, and that was her advice back to them.
And is it possible, sorry, I don't mean to be sounding like I'm grilling you, but is it possible that should council, I guess, take a bigger ownership of the delivery of this installation, it could potentially cost more?
That's the answer, we don't know.
Okay, and so potentially if this motion does get up, we will have that answer. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, no worries, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to grill you.
Councillor Smeliotis, do you have a question? Councillor Pete.
Thank you, Worship. Just a couple of questions. One of the mover, please, considering this is a document that the public will read, I always have trouble with motions worded like this. Can the mover please explain, or perhaps put some wording around by in externals? Well, I mean, we'll all have a different interpretation. The general public wouldn't have a clue what Councillor Bray is talking when he talks about any buy-in externals. But could I just have the mover consider that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pete. I use that wording to try and keep it as brief as possible. But really, what I'm saying is that I'm hoping that maybe council staff, they say that as part of their work program, they can do the whole installation. But if they do, they may have to buy something from outside the organisation, some piece of hardware or something which is a cost that can't be covered internally, and that's what I mean by any buy-in externals, things that that can't be incorporated in the week-to-week work program that council would normally do.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can I just ask a further question?
Go ahead, Councillor Pete.
Please, just in relation to this, and I sincerely agree with the position Councillor Bray is taking on this in relation to controlling debt. But we've just heard from the officers, and from what I understand, we're talking here about attempting to save $100 or $200. I mean, at the end of the day, I'll certainly support endeavours to save a couple of $1,000s. But I really do think this is just nitpicking and just slowing the process up unneedingly. And I would like to put an amendment, if possible, Your Worship.
Councillor Pete, unfortunately you've already debated and so you're unable to move an amendment now. Hopefully someone may like to try an alternate motion if this doesn't get up, but you may also like to try an alternate motion if this doesn't get up. And given that we've already heard clarification from the seconder that this doesn't actually change anything, I'm wondering if it will get up. Okay, Councillor Pete, did you have anything further to add?
No, if this doesn't get up, Your Worship, I do flag the amendment as the report is printed.
Thank you, Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. This has been a really tricky one to decide because it is such a worthy cause, and I do like to see that at least in this motion, it guarantees that the installation will go ahead for this very important piece of infrastructure within our city and piece of artwork. I suppose when I look at how the project may be managed into the future, I've got to look at how it's been managed so far. So my question is to the officers. Is my understanding that it was a feasibility study that council paid for before this started?
Mayor Thompson, yes, there was a feasibility study. So that resolution was with the previous council, and the council agreed through PCW to pay for a feasibility study, and then this project is an outcome of that feasibility study.
Yep. And from that, there was a state government grant for $15,000 to fulfil this and to become a reality. Yeah. So I suppose from those estimates and having this feasibility study, the initial grant, now we've sort of gone by reading to this 6,000 odd.
6,640.
6,640. Well done. Over. So do we know what that money? Why there was a shortfall in that money? How it went 6,600 over?
So this was a community-led project. What they did was envisioned and worked out what they wanted to raise awareness around domestic violence, and in particular the history with the women who presented last time and the lady who was 90 who started the first women's shelter. So that's what their main thoughts. Yeah. And they engaged with artists and then found out how much it costs.
Yeah, and they've done some amazing work on that aspect of the project. Our expertise is in the delivering of these projects, so I don't see this as a negative type thing. I'm still umming if the couple $100 it may save is worth it at this stage, but I definitely see where the mover is coming from.
Councillor Jamieson.
Notice I didn't touch the things. Thank you. Look, perceptions become reality very, very quickly. When I look at this, I feel mean-spirited. That's what I feel, mean-spirited. I mean, it's a bit, and like people sometimes say that to me, council gives money in one hand and tries to claw it back with the other hand. You know, I just think we're bigger than that. You know, that's a quote of yours. I really think that I'm with Councillor Pete. I'm not going to vote for this motion, and I'm, I understand where you are, but it's that perception out there. Have we got sympathy for this or not? I mean, we've just had this great presentation. I mean, everybody must have been moved, and then here we are clawing it back. I think I just can't do it. I think it's disgraceful, and I won't be voting for this motion. No offence, but that's the way I feel.
Councillor Olsen.
I move an amendment, please, Mayor, as written in the agenda.
Go ahead. No. Yes, go ahead, Councillor Olsen.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, Councillor Peake, Councillor Jamieson made excellent points. And look, we've just spent an hour listening to domestic violence, and now we're debating $6,000 for an installation of artwork, not commemorating it,
Memorialising.
memorial artwork. It's just unbelievable. We've already had council staff go and vet the costings. We're project management. We pay artists to come and install artworks throughout the entire city of Onkaparinga. This is nothing special. We commission artists to come and deliver art for us. And that includes the installation. This is nothing new. And we're not even paying for this artwork. All we're paying for is the installation in Rotary Park, a key place in Christie's Beach where that first shelter was came about. And we're nitpicking over some very minor amounts. I mean, I like Councillor James, a little bit disappointed in the way that this has gone. And, a little bit embarrassed considering we've just had all those women up there come and talk to us about domestic violence. I mean, this is really actually embarrassing. So I hope you'll support this installation and this amendment. And look, let's get it delivered. Thank you.
Councillor agrees for a question. You've already debated. Have you? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm more than happy to second this amendment, Councillor Olsen. Look, and I guess the reason why I asked all those questions before is because I think it's really important that we understand what council has already done to ascertain the cost of this project, and it has been confirmed that these are reasonable costs. So I don't mind the idea of us looking really closely at the costs of something, but I think if we start going down the path of, what was the word that was used, auditing these costs, and I guess looking for a couple of $100 savings here and there, that process is going to cost us probably more than the entire project itself. So I think it's a little bit unfortunate that was even suggested. I absolutely support this. I think that, the deputation we had at the Strategic Directions Committee was very heartfelt, and I have to say that every single person in the chamber at that time supported the Mayor's motion to actually provide this funding. It is something that is really worthwhile for our community. I don't think we should be nitpicking. I think we should be proudly saying that we support the efforts of these community organisations in providing something that is really meaningful, not only to those women who have been subject to domestic violence, but also to the next generation to come. So, members, I'd urge you to support this amendment.
Councillor Olsen, would you like to close debate on the amendment? We'll go to vote on the amendment. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. We'll put the motion as amended. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Okay, everyone, just a reminder, we've got quite a few people hanging around waiting for the outcome of their reports. So we've got one more item and then we'll get to those reports. So the Audit, Risk, Value and Efficiency Committee meeting minutes. We have a brief presentation from the current Chair, David Powell. Would you like to come forward?
Well, good evening, Thompson, elected members and ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to provide the presiding members report for the Audit, Risk, Value and Efficiency Committee, also known as ARVEC, for 2020. We met on 9 occasions during the period from October to October 2020. We consider a range of matters within terms of our reference, and that included amending the terms of reference this year to change our start times, to bring it back to an afternoon session to reduce and eliminate costs associated with running an evening meeting. So we are working on cost management there. This change will be reviewed in December 20 as part of the annual review of the terms of reference. There are a number of matters that we considered during the year, obviously in 9 meetings. In accordance with our duties under the Local Government Act, we meet with the auditors, BDO, in relation to the financial statements. And on the 12th of October, last Monday, we resolved that we're satisfied that the financial statements presented fairly the state of affairs of the council for the year ended June 2020. Now, my understanding is that that will be presented to you in a future meeting. I do commend you for an outcome better than budget in a very difficult year in relation to both COVID and also the outage that we have with ICT. But I do, as a council, suggest that you consider that in future that large deficits are not really sustainable in the long term. So I would encourage you to have a look at that future years. I want to acknowledge the work of the finance team for the compilation of the financial statements and their effective working relationship with the external audit team. So during the year, we consider quite a number of financial reporting sustainability matters, including quarterly financial management reports, the draft budget, the long-term financial plan, key assumptions and forecast indicators, the end-of-year financial reporting timetable, and we also consider the regional authority reports, including both SWARA and Council Solutions, noting that Council Solutions actually ceased trading in February 2020 this year. We consider internal controls and risk management systems, including the quarterly risk management updates, the strategic risk register review. We reviewed council insurances. We considered a risk evaluation summary report that comes from the local government risk management services. We consider the work health and safety and return to work activities. We considered an information report on hospitality and expense reporting and grants and sponsorship program review. In terms of the external audit, we consider their completion letter, which is of their findings, their management report, their external audit plan, and we complete an external audit fraud questionnaire that's provided to ARVEC and also to the CEO and the CFO to complete in relation to any awareness of fraud. We also considered internal audit updates during the year. We reviewed reports on infrastructure asset register maintenance, a rates revenue assurance review, legislative compliance and a delegation awareness report. One of our functions is value and efficiency, and we considered quarterly reports in relation to improvement opportunities and certainly acknowledge the efforts in terms of trying to identify opportunities for improvements and savings within the organisation. We also consider the internal review applications under section 270 and we've considered a report on that. We obviously review our terms of reference, the annual performance review, this report and the work plan. We did consider aspects in relation to the systems outage in December. We've considered cliff top access and vegetation barriers on several occasions over the last 4 or 5 years, and building rules assessment report. In terms of membership of the committee, there was a change during the year. Councillor Cowan left the group, as did Councillor de Graaf as the proxy, and our current members are Councillor Eaton, Councillor O'Brien, Councillor Jamieson, and Mayor Thompson as proxy, and we have an independent member, Peter Brass. And I'd certainly like to thank the members and management for their valuable contribution to the work of the committee this year. In the report, you'll see the number of meetings that were attended by the various members, essentially very good attendance records. And also, in accordance with the terms of reference, we review our annual performance against the terms of reference, and a summary of that is attached to this report. I will note that some of the comments are not necessarily in accordance with the terms of reference or the requirements of the Act, but it's something to be considered for future terms of reference of the council. But as this is my last meeting, or will be in November, I have one more meeting. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to serve the council in this way over a period of, I think it's 9 years. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, David, and I think we might all like to thank you as well for your service over the last 9 years. We've appreciated the work that you've done, the commitment that you've continued to put in. So thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Before you duck off, I'll just see if we've got any questions from elected members. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. With regards to the annual performance survey results, I guess that's something that you've devised and involved in. I'm just there were a couple of things that were fairly pertinent that I did questions on notice in 2015, and it hit the fan by 2017. In 9, the responses to recently it was said that there was a failure of agenda reports for reports to be presented as requested. And then the next one was about credit card. Is there something in place to be able to stop that sort of thing from happening? As a result of that, how are these surveys done? Are they just...
These surveys?
Once there's a survey and you get results, are there actions that result from the surveys?
Yeah, well, the intention, Councillor Brown, would be that they would be considered in terms of improvements to both the activities of RVEC as well as potentially under terms of reference. In terms of terms of reference, our reference point is always the Local Government Act as a starting point, and also what is considered good or normal practice in relation to audit committees, audit risk committees within councils. So there is opportunity to obviously look at ways of always improving the activities of a council like, committee like RVEC.
Right. In 25, there was a response which I sort of hold closely of a similar opinion regarding the undertaking review of the community grants, which we used to do annually. For some reason or other, it hasn't. Is there a process with RVEC as a result of this comment?
That particular matter was discussed in the last RVEC meeting. My understanding is that there is some activity about to commence or a report to be brought to the chamber in a future meeting. I don't know the exact timing of that. That would be up to the administration to do. But my understanding is that there is a process that will happen working with the chamber in relation to the grants process.
So RVEC don't have anything to do with this if there's a problem?
I'm not sure necessarily there is a problem, but there is there are reports. There was a report to RVEC some 4 years ago in relation to grants internal audit, but that didn't necessarily identify that there was a significant issue with grants at that point in time. But my understanding is that there certainly have been requests from members of RVEC to consider, can we improve the grants process going forward? And my understanding is that there'd be a report that will come from administration to the chamber in relation to future reviews of the grant program.
So if there's any sort of a probity issue, would that go to RVEC in the future?
If there was a particular concern with that, my understanding on grants is that there will be a review of the whole program in terms of the number of categories of grants, etc., going forward. And there is an opportunity to be looking at that, given a pause, I guess, that's happened in relation to COVID, to do with a lot of the activities, all the programs that were being supported by grants. So there is an opportunity now to actually look at that whole grant program for the future without preempting what it might look like. I mean, that review has not been conducted.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that might be Scott. I'm glad you had that much trouble with that screen. I hate it. I'll be glad to never use it again.
That's it. Through you, Mayor Thompson, just to provide councillors with some information. I think some, if not all of you, are aware that we're currently actually undertaking the review for the grants programs, which looks at all, I think, 32 grant programs that currently exist, the criteria associated with those grants, the outputs and outcomes that have been achieved to date, and whether or not they've actually met the promises that were made by those people that received those grants, and if not, then what was the issue associated with that, and then subsequently whether or not we'd need to review the current policy, develop a new, more comprehensive policy. That work's actually being undertaken presently.
Thanks, David. There's no further questions.
Great,
and
thank you.
Thanks again for your service.
Thanks.
Okay, members, we're moving into the reports. The first report is 9.1, Selix Beach Historic Motorcycle Race 2021. Councillor Peat.
Thank you, Worship.
Oh, sorry, my apologies, Councillor Peat. I've skipped ahead. We haven't actually moved the minutes. Is there a mover for the minutes? Deputy Mayor Eaton. Is there a seconder for those minutes? Councillor Jamieson. We'll go to vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Over to 9.1, the Selix Beach Motorcycle Race, and Councillor Peat.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to put the motion as printed in the report.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, I will, Your Worship. Members, I would think you would agree that the major consideration here is the protection of, one, the soft sand area above the high water line, the management to prevent damage of the pebble banks, and of course our possibly endangered hooded plovers. And I draw your attention to Brenton Matter's deputation, and on page 69 and 70 of our report, the commitment that organisers have given council and state government agencies regarding the management of these matters. Your Worship, please, members, I am a member of the Washpool Working Group, and through Facebook, a friend to all the environmental and conservation groups in this area. To my knowledge, I report that volunteers have not recorded any nesting of hooded plovers along this section of beach that the motorcycle race will be undertaken. What I can report to you is that there are 2 sets of hooded plovers nesting at Port Walunga. More excitingly is that of the 2 pairs that are breeding, 2 of them are siblings of the breeding program last year in that same area. So there are hooded plovers that are nesting currently, but they are at Port Walunga, and there has been no reporting of the nesting of hooded plovers along the section of beach of which this motorcycle race will be undertaken. And I commend the motion to members.
Councillor Greaves wishing to second?
Yep, thank you.
Would you like to speak to that?
Yes, thanks, Mayor Thompson. Just very briefly. Look, I rise to absolutely support this event. My recollection from the decision made by council back in 2016-17 for this event was that the organisers of this event absolutely went above and beyond to try and meet all of the requirements, and they were significant requirements that council put to them to ensure not only the safety of the flora and the fauna, but also the safety of the participants and the safety of the people who also attended. The first year, I certainly recollect, was incredibly successful. And this organisation has gone on to actually continue to provide an outstanding event which does draw not only a lot of people, but a lot of tourism dollars to this part of the city. So members, also responding to Councillor Peat's comments, I absolutely support them, and I'd urge you to continue to support what is a really unique event in South Australia.
Councillor Bray.
Thank you. I actually pushed my button to second, but I'll just say that this, along with other events that are conducted by organisations within our city, seem to be very professionally run. I'm not saying I'm not necessarily implying I even support them all, but whether I support them or not, they're certainly very professionally run by those who put them up. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
I just have to say, what a report. It covers absolutely everything, and they've bent over backwards. And I have an environmental side and a thought for the plovers, and everything is covered. And I think it's brilliant from the reporting officer.
Councillor McMahon.
Thank you. To reiterate a few things that have been said tonight, I think if there's a bar that is the standard of the environment protection that should be put in place by event organisers, Brenton and his crew have gone well above that bar, and this event is actually something that we can hold up and be proud of, an event that can lead as a great way of showing other events how they can also meet this high bar to such a standard. I would also like to push this historic event, how much it does give back to the community. It was touched on a little bit in the deputation, but we have members here from the Aldinga Bay Surf Lifesaving Club. This is a significant fundraiser for this Surf Lifesaving Club, and that money that gets raised over this event does help to protect our beaches over the whole summer for the whole of the community as well. So just like to add that one in it.
Councillor de Graaf.
Just a quick question. It's about this and the other event as well. If there was to be an issue with COVID, say if someone's had family that have visited from interstate, et cetera, worst case scenario, and I'm sure that wouldn't happen because things are pretty well controlled here. But is it the case that their insurance covers that and they are completely liable for that and council is completely excluded from any liability?
Through you, Mayor Thompson, it's correct. The event holders do have to indemnify council against all claims for everything and anything, both council and the state government, the owner of the Crown land. That's correct. They have to put in place all sorts of COVID-safe management plans following whatever the federal or state government directives are of that time. March next year.
Councillor Peat, would you like to close debate?
Your Worship, I'll just make a quick statement really, and it refers to the comments made by the councillors, but particularly Councillor Brown and Councillor Brown. And I think we should really commend the staff for the effort here. This is an excellent report, and it commenced with an intense community engagement process here, which is an attachment to this report. And I think we just underestimate the workload and the effort that staff have gone to facilitate this event with the organisers. So I think just on behalf of elected members, I'd like to thank staff for the effort they've put in here.
Thanks, Councillor Peat. We'll go to vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried unanimously. Congratulations to those that are here in the gallery. Look forward to seeing you at that great event. Members, I know it's past 8:30, but if you don't mind, I'd like to push through to those items that people are still hanging around for. All okay to proceed with that direction? Great. So I'm now going to bring forward the motion on notice, 11.1, which is Councillor Tonkin's motion, Southern Women Matter. Councillor Tonkin, still happy to move that motion? Would you like to speak to the motion?
Members, domestic abuse, whether it's physical, emotional or financial, all impact on the lives of vulnerable people. Each form of abuse can contribute to a lifetime of mental and physical suffering and can be soul-destroying, devastating. 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence in their lives. 1 in 3. I will put to you that everyone in this room knows or suspects someone you know or have known who is a perpetrator or a victim of some form of domestic violence. My heart breaks for the children of those relationships. No child should have to fear for themselves or for their parent. In the city of Coringa alone, the number of reported family and domestic abuse related offences increased by 9.5% in 2018-2019. That's reported cases. How many go unreported? How many who have not been called out or not been intervened by family, friends or authorities? How will COVID have affected these families? Indications are that it will have increased the violence exponentially. To carry the stigma, it's unfair that the onus is on the victims to take action due to domestic violence, to carry the stigma of domestic violence, to worry for their children's futures above the normal. In consideration of the work that this organisation does to support women affected by domestic abuse, I ask you to support not only the motion as written today, but also the Southern Women Matter campaign now and into the future.
Thank you. Councillor Smiliotis wishing to second. Would you like to speak to that motion?
Briefly.
Go ahead.
So I rise to support Councillor Tonkin and commend the motion that she's brought forward. I think a lot of people some may argue that signage is not really special or important. And I sit there and think about all the women who have, and young women as well, who have suffered through domestic violence of many forms that Councillor Tonkins has mentioned, and it's become the norm. And when it becomes the norm, you don't talk about it. And the importance of this signage, not just within this 16-day period, but maybe down the track we can consider this council putting them up more often, is sometimes when you drive by that signage 10 times, 20 times, 5 times, you think about a family member or someone you know that you should open up and speak to them and ask the question. Or you're someone who is going through domestic violence, but you are hiding it to protect the children or protect the ones you love, or it has, for some people, become the normal thing and you think this is the way things are supposed to be. So I think it's really important not only that we support this campaign, but maybe look into the future of having this signage up long term. Just in our council, not even that long, I want to say in the last 2 years or so, we had one domestic violence incident that happened the street behind Coringa Way, Morphevale, the street, the name eludes me, and then we had one under Bank Grove, Hackham West as well. And sometimes I think if that signage was up in prominent areas and people were driving by that signage and they thought about it time and time again, and maybe they would get the courage that so many don't before it's too late to speak to someone and start the conversation. So thank you, Councillor Tonkin.
Councillor Bray.
Yes, I'd like to speak in support of this and agree completely with what Councillor Thamiliotis has said, but I'd just like to add a bit of background to the figure where 1 in 3 women are victims of violence. That comes from Australian Bureau of Statistics Personal Safety Survey, and in the context of domestic violence, we have to be a bit careful because that particular survey refers to the proportion of adult women who have experienced any type of physical violence at all, including the threat of violence. And that's not necessarily something that occurs in the home. And the example given, things such as an altercation with an aggressive shopping trolley driver or an incident of road rage. So it's quite a large figure, but has quite a low bar in terms of the definition and doesn't specifically apply to domestic violence. So possibly the domestic violence situation is very bad as it is not quite as black as 1 in 3 women might imply. The ABS statistics show approximately 1.06% of women are physically assaulted by their partner or ex-partner each year in Australia. So that's the annual figure is about 1%. But going back to that 3%, that 1 in 3 figure of people who in their lifetime have been affected by violence, we need to bear in mind that the figure for men is worse. The figure for men is 1 in 2. So that's the reason why I'm very, very pleased that the answers to my question in terms of things not being gender specific was that it won't be gender specific and it'll be raising awareness about violence of any kind. Thank you.
Councillor Greaves.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Thompson. Look, I rise to support this as well, absolutely. And thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Bray, and just some clarity, I guess, around the issue being a lot broader than just violence against women. I just wanted to, I guess, ask a question of the Mayor. Last year you wrote to Michelle Lensink regarding the request to government for funding for establishing an outer southern community, southern domestic violence hub. Did we actually get a response to that request? And can you recall what that response was?
From memory, we just got like an acknowledgement. So thanks for the letter, but no action forward.
And so, I mean, I know in this motion it is fairly generic. We're writing to the Honourable Michelle Lensink, MLC. Is it your intention to, I guess, reiterate our support and possibly push it a bit further in terms of the non-response from last year, given the importance of this matter, and particularly given the increased prevalence of this matter while we've been in lockdown? I think it's really important that that fact also be, I guess, raised. Violence against women, violence against men, domestic violence in totality has increased, and that's been recognised internationally. So I think that, you know, if you're happy to actually include some commentary around that. Thank you.
Yes, the letter has been drafted. I chose, when I brought this last month, not to include the letter because I thought it was a little, didn't want to assume that you would support it. Yeah, I'll share the letter with you should this get up. And yes, it does refer to the increase in the statistics for this year as a result of COVID. Absolutely. Yep. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. Councillor Greaves has returned and stolen my thunder and all my questions that time. I'll just quickly add on that I do rise to support this as well. And it's really important. I see this signage as a great way of starting and changing the conversation. We look at domestic violence almost sometimes through an outside lens of that might not necessarily happen to me, it doesn't happen to my family, but we are all friends, we are all neighbours, and the stats don't lie. The stats would say that someone in your life, whether you know it or not, is suffering from a domestic relationship in a domestic household. But our responsibility is sometimes as a neighbour, we might hear things, we might hear noises that trigger alarm bells, and we think that's not my business. It's not my place to maybe call the authorities if we do hear a disturbing noise, or that's their business, that's their family. This is about changing that conversation, giving people the confidence to have the courage to speak up, even if it's not directly involving your family itself. Thank you.
Councillor Tonkin, would you like to close debate? I'd just like to put the motion as written, please. Thank you. We'll go to vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. And just before we go to break, one more item, item 9.2, is the temporary road closure, Walunga Hill Climb 2020. Councillor Greaves wishing to move? Yep, would you like to speak to that motion?
Thanks. Very, very briefly. Members, as a resident of Walunga, I certainly know that not only do our residents and our visitors, but our businesses also enjoy the support of these great events. There have been so few complaints over the years, and certainly I am aware that that the organisers live up to what they say they're going to deliver in terms of informing community and actually going out of their way to ensure that community members are still able to gain access and egress from their residences. So I ask you to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Brown wishing to second. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Just briefly, that another good report. Thank you. I think you've covered everything.
Councillor Bray.
Yeah, so just to confirm what I read in the report, after last year's event, there were no complaints?
Through you, Mayor Thompson. None that we found on our records for that. So, and any other complaints from prior to that event were acknowledged in the report.
Yeah. Councillors, after last year's event, I contacted people in Walunga and said that if they had concerns or complaints, they really do need to communicate those to the staff to have them recorded. And so it's clearly my understanding that that nobody has done that. So in the past, I've been very sensitive to this issue. There was an event like this held a couple of times in Clarendon, and to say it was terrible is an understatement. That the people in Walunga are supporting this, and I haven't attended it, so I don't have an opinion on how it sounds to me, but what matters is that the people are satisfied that it's adequately run. So, yeah, thank you.
Councillor Greaves, would you like to close? We'll go to vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Well done. Good night. Thanks for coming. See you at the event. Members, would you like to move us off to a 10-minute break? Someone like to move, please? Deputy Mayor Eaton and Councillor Smiliotis, all those in favour? It's carried. We'll come back at 9. Thank you. Welcome back, members. Just while we're waiting for some of the others to return to the gallery, I don't know if you've noticed, but we've been having some pretty serious technical difficulties this evening. Hopefully we've sorted it in the break, but appreciate your patience if not.
Is my mic? Yeah, my microphone's on.
Councillor Smiliotis, were you?
Are we continuing? Are we going? I heard the ding ding. We're on.
Yeah, we're on.
So can I move?
I haven't brought us to that motion yet, but
All right.
We'll start again, shall we? All right, kicking back off at 9.3, the Cherry Gardens Black Spot Agreement. Councillor Smiliotis, Deputy Mayor Eaton, wishing to move. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, all I'd like to say is that the funding's there. It's been identified as a black spot. So therefore, let's just go ahead and do it. One point I'd like to just raise is there was some concerns raised with the height of the barriers put in on Main Road. A few people were finding that the koalas couldn't get under. So can we just make sure that we don't hit that same problem when we do it, please? Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Smiliotis, wish to second.
Just really briefly to go on from Councillor Eaton, this is 100% funded through the federal government, which is fantastic. This 1.34 million will go a long way to addressing a lot of the issues that have been raised about Cherry Gardens Road. I think myself and probably Councillor Eaton and councillors even before my time have put in many EM inquiries about Cherry Gardens Road. So this funding is going to be fantastic for our community.
Councillor Bray.
Yes, I'd like to just first of all support Councillor Eaton in the issue he raised about the wildlife. I hope that's taken very seriously. The only other comment I'd like to make is I hope that the state government can follow the federal government's wonderful leadership here and provide more 100% funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Eaton, would you like to close debate? We'll go to vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Next item is 9.4. It's an update report on the revocation of community land at 28 Helmsman's Terrace, Seaford. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. I'd like to move as written.
Go ahead. Would you like to speak to that motion?
Yeah, just really briefly, just like to commend staff on this report and for the land revocation process. This is the pinnacle of what this process is all about. If you drive past this parcel of land, you'd probably be surprised to know that landowner doesn't currently own that land. When you look at the community engagement, with only 2 people responding and both those people speaking in favour, it gives me a lot of confidence that there's no objections out there. The residents around Helsman Terrace are far more excited for the fact that we get to retain the basketball key and pergola in a little separate issue that we've been doing later on. That's all I've been hearing about. So very happy residents down there. Thank you.
Councillor Peat, wishing to second.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Would you like to speak as seconder?
No.
Thank you. Councillor de Graaf.
I was just wanting to either move it or second it, but happy to support it. It is only 45 metres square, and I totally agreed with what Councillor McMahon said. This is what the revocation process is supposed to be about, not the selling off of girl guide halls and kind of thing like that. So I do support it.
Thank you. Councillor Bray.
Yes, I'll just push my button to second it, but I like Councillor Graff's comment, it's only 45 metres square. Mind you, if things continued on the way they were a few years ago, that would be called a housing allotment today. Thank you.
Councillor McMahon, would you like to close debate? We'll go to vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Item 9.4 is the On Business Partner Program Grants Round 2 2020. Are there any updates to this report? No. Members, what is your wish? Would someone like to move? Deputy Mayor Eaton, would you like to speak to the motion?
Only that I'm confirming I actually sat on the committees and support the findings. So I think we just need to get on and get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor de Graaf wishing to second. Would you like to speak to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, just briefly, I just wanted to share something that happened to me a few weeks ago when I was at a community event on the weekend. There was a small business owner there, and he had actually won one of these grants from a few years ago. That was the $3,000 startup for his business, and he just said that really actually helped launch his business, and now his business was doing really well and was very successful. So I just wanted to give you that feedback and let you know that, even though it is only $3,000, sometimes that is all businesses need to actually get a start in some cases. So good on you for doing this great work.
Thank you. Councillor Bray.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Thompson. I take the point that Councillor Graff raised about the possibility that there may be some cases where it is possible to identify where such a small amount of money may help get a business off its feet. But given get a business on its feet, but given the long-term success rate of small business, the likelihood is very, very small that council's investment will have resulted in a business a number of years down the track. Small business failure is just really part of the process. It's a very high rate, and I don't know whether we should essentially be guessing who might succeed or not based on an assessment process. And then, of course, what are we actually assessing in terms of business in the city? We're actually assessing those who put in applications. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the money we're putting in is going to the most viable prospects at all. It's simply going to the most viable prospects out of those who choose to put in an application. And then having a look at the people who were awarded grants, I look at, as part of the process, we have some money that we need to distribute, and so those on the committee have to do the best they can at trying to find the best ones. It's probably a good thing I wasn't on the committee, because in trying to find the best ones, I wouldn't have known what to do and wouldn't have chosen any. If you go through that list, these are businesses that have decided to apply for the grant very sensibly because it's available. Whether or not it's going to make a long-term difference to their business is an entirely different matter. If they're smart enough to apply for it and they can give a reasoned enough argument to get it approved, then fair enough. It's us who have to question ourselves as to whether this is a good use of ratepayers' money. And I don't believe that it comes even close to being a halfway sensible use of ratepayer money. And I hope that we review these programs review them very objectively in terms of whether they actually do contribute to employment in our city. That's a second level. One level is, will it sustain a business? And especially for self-employed people, businesses fail, people start again, try something new. Often people may have a number of failures before they finally succeed. That's part of the process. But at the second level, the one that should really matter to us is even harder to achieve, and that is it going to promote employment by that business and ongoing employment? And for some of these in here where they talk about the desirability of ongoing employment, there's no way, given the cost of employing a person, that $3,000 is going to have any influence at all. So that brings you then back to the question, why on earth would we do it? So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. And just to provide, I guess, a bit of an opposing view to Councillor Bray's. This particular grant program is not just about handing out cash. It certainly is a way to provide a level of support for businesses, whether it's a startup, whether it's for advertising or marketing expertise, whether or not it's to bring some of those things in to assist their business. But the actual process of people applying for this grant is also a way that our On Business Partner program can actually connect with businesses to provide a whole range of other supports. And I think, you know, in the past it's been things like, you know, professional development, it's about marketing, it's about better social media use, it's about a whole range of things. It actually connects those businesses to the specialists and to the council staff who can then assist in growing their business. Yes, it is a bit of cash, and I think Councillor Bray's right. We can't hand on heart say this has contributed to X number of people employed. But I think if you have a look at the success of businesses, not all of them, but a fair whack of them, the success of those businesses who have actually received grants in the past, and I'll, you know, give you one example, Shifty Lizard. You know, if you've ever been up High Street in Walunga, Shifty Lizard actually got a $3,000 grant so they could actually get the equipment required so that they could actually have all of their beers on tap. That business is now employing locals, lots of locals. You know, that business is now open 7 days a week from lunchtime right through to late evenings. If you can't tell me that our contribution of $3,000 didn't go some way, our ability to connect them with the expertise to support their business doesn't go a long way, then I don't know what does. I absolutely support this. It is a really hard task, Councillor Eaton, actually going through the process and wading through all of those applications, because it is difficult to pick winners. But I think every single one of those businesses who has made the effort to put in an application then goes on, whether or not they're successful, to also have the support of our On Business program. And I think that fundamentally is what this is about.
Deputy Mayor Eaton, would you like to close debate? No, we'll go to vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Item 9.6 is the quarterly financial update. Is there an update to this report? No. Councillor Pate wishing to move?
Just a question of the officers, please, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Just in reference to dot point 3, the remark, obviously, that the carryover budget will be incorporated into the 2021 budget. I went right through the report. Can someone just give me a brief understanding of that? Is there a specific area within the budget it will be allocated to? How will that money be spread across different budget lines?
Through you, Mayor Thompson. Councillor Pitt, if you look at attachment 3 of the report,
yep,
it's got a list of all the carry forwards, which is broken down between operating, renewal and new and significant upgrade at individual level.
Yeah, I just had problem understanding it. So. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Brown wishing to move, or did you have a question? Happy to move? Would you like to speak as the mover? Can you turn her on, please?
I've had extensive questions earlier today. Just reinforce that I have concern with the carry forwards. We seem to have them every year, and admittedly it's less this carry forward than it was prior. But I just wonder whether we're a little bit overzealous with some of our projects sometimes if we've got so many carry forwards, such a low extensive amount of money. It's just a comment on it that can be taken on board. And the budget impact of the 5.95 million operating deficit on the original budget, the effects that it has, and that we in the chamber need to have the discipline to manage it. Other than that, yes, good report. Thank you.
Members, is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Jamieson, would you like to speak as seconder? There doesn't appear to be any further debate. Councillor Brown, did you wish to close? Or are you happy?
Yes. Ready? Firing? Able? Good. On page 313, the significant financial risks. Just wondering from, and it may be the CEO that can let us know on this one, the housing stock transfers to NGO housing associations, there was a hold on it, and I had emailed the minister, gosh, when I think there was a change in government, but it had a lot of impacts with the handing over of the public housing stock and mandating that it was 75% rebate that council had to pay, and on one particular year it was $1 million. I'm just wondering where we're trading with this, that they're still arresting it, not passing over anymore. I mean, it was a prior government, but they may see it. I know it's costing Michelle Lensick a lot of money on public housing at the moment to get it up to date.
Yeah, if I may, through you, Mayor Thompson. Look, we do recognise the significant impact that can have, and haven't had any further transfers. It is something we continually monitor, because you are correct in that we have to, we are mandated to give back a 75% rebate. There hasn't been any movement lately, but I think, like you say, there are reported issues in maintenance and other aspects of public housing at the moment. So it is something we're keenly watching.
So are we negotiating with them to try and stop it from the public housing to, I guess it was seen as a cheaper way to send it off to some of the charity groups than manage it. But it's a huge impact to local government if that starts up again.
I think this is my personal preference is not to raise that with them at the moment, but continually monitor. And if something should start to move, then start to advocate for our benefit, but also maybe engage the LGA as well to assist us in that. But it's one of those matters I wouldn't like to go and start to negotiate on something that they're not asking us to even consider at the moment.
Yeah, well, because there are items like cost shifting, they were looking at there are various areas where it has cost shifted, but then again, they've given away the rate capping, and there's always been the argument with local government because of the cost shifting. It's an impact to local government, and that was purely cost shifting. So we're not going to negotiate it not going to try and reinforce the fact that this is a huge impact to local government, but it's also a problem when the state government give away government housing.
Through you, Mayor Thompson. Look, I just reiterate, it's not something I want to raise at the moment with them, because I don't want them to start to think about it. But you can rest assured that should they start to head down that path again, it is something that we will push back on as strongly as we can.
I think the Mayor's heard me too, so she'll be mixing in certain circles. Thank you.
Councillor Brown, you haven't quite closed. You just asked questions, and Councillor Pete's had his hand up, so I'm just going to quickly go to him before you officially close. Councillor Pete, did you have a burning question or a last comment?
Please, it was just an just a clarification. I understand this report and had a good look at attachment 3, which shows the carry forwards. My understanding, though, of budget review also generally showed us what surplus we had. In other words, what projects came in under budget and we have a surplus. Can the officer tell me where I can find that in this report?
Turn it off and on again.
Turn it off and on. Oh, it's still flashing. Try it again. On and off again. Yep.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Thompson. Councillor Peat, if you look on page, must be page 3, the executive summary of the report.
Page 3?
Attachment 1, page 3.
Attachment 1. Yeah.
So that goes through the variances to budget, the savings, operating capital, etc. And the salary savings and productivity targets we've met, that sort of thing.
So cut to the quick. How much in surplus is there from budget for review?
Through you, Mayor Thompson, there's no surplus. There was some savings across the 4 departments, but then there was corporate costs like leave provisions, etc., which have absorbed that.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Councillor Brown, did you have anything further to add to your closing debate? Thank you. We'll go to vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Item 9.7 is Council's responses to COVID-19. No updates to this report? No. Councillor Olsen.
I move the motion, please.
Moving as written.
I'll move it with the little change that I've given staff, and the first bit in 2, which approves the extension of time to pay.
Thank you. We'll just bring that up.
So just to explain that, it's just making it clear when we first did this way back, we didn't include the community-owned sports clubs. And so as per the response we got back today from staff, for just making it clear for those clubs, it's a 25% reduction on expenses and a $5,000 cash payment as per the previous one. I didn't see it in the report. You might be right, but just making it clear in the motion, that's all that is. So it's no difference. Right?
Go ahead.
Look, I think this is a good move to continue to support these sporting clubs, council-owned and community-owned. I think that's pretty obvious. They really haven't had any income over this period. They're still suffering. So I think that makes sense, point 1. Point 2, for those ratepayers who really are struggling, to pay those rates in time, to give them an extra 8 weeks to get them back on the feet, to pick up employment, I think is a good thing to do. I think that's worthy because it won't affect a lot of the ratepayers. However, those who really are struggling, I think will appreciate that extra time to get themselves back on their feet. Number 3, I'm happy to put forward in this motion, we don't do anything with hand sanitation, but I have a notice of motion coming up, which I'll actually go a little bit further into that. But for the purposes of this motion, I'm happy to leave it, which no further additions at this time. And number 4, I'm quite happy to support the recovery of those businesses to get them moving and back on their feet again too. So I hope you'll support this.
Councillor Bray wishing to second?
Yes, and just to make the observation that Councillor Olsen has put those extra words in which were taken from the body of the report as well. They were in the body of the report, so yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Councillor de Graaf.
Thank you. I have a question. I did put this in a bit earlier today, but I wasn't sure if I got it in time. Two questions, actually. So if Councillor Olsen hasn't put forward the motions yet about the toilets, I'm assuming if that gets accepted later, it'll override this one, because this particular motion isn't accepting the soap to go. Is that right? Or
So this is for this time. So if Councillor Olsen's motion comes forward, then there'd be a report coming back in, what was it, January or April? January.
All right, gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, oh, good. All right, my other question is actually about the rates. So I'm just wondering how that $260,000 comes about, because usually when I make inquiries about this, I'm told that there's not actually that many people who are applying for rates hardships applications, and there's not that many people who are having these issues with that. But then I've seen very high numbers of people who are on payment plans. And if there's $260,000 there, how is that actually made up?
Through you, Mayor Thompson, the calculation of $260,000 of lost fines and interest revenue was based on our outstanding balance at June, which was $7.4 million. So under the Local Government Act, we charge a 2% fine on the first month that the rates become overdue, and then there's an interest that is charged on an accumulated monthly basis, which is based on the cash advance debenture rate plus 3%, and that's set out through the Local Government Act. So using those calculations and based on the $7.4 million of outstanding rates that we had at the end of June, we took the assumption that all of those rates, if they were to continue to be overdue for the 3 months, as outlined in the report, it would total $260,000.
So, but I do understand that a component of that is overdue, the overdue rates. So that's the fines that haven't been issued, but then the other component is the interest that hasn't been accrued.
That's correct.
What, could you separate those figures, please?
I would have to take that on notice to separate that in its exact form.
Okay, happy if you could provide the details later. Do you have a rough estimate at all, whether it be like 75% versus 25%?
I would have to take that on notice, Councillor de Graaf.
Yeah, okay. I'm still, I look forward to seeing that. I'll question a bit more when it comes in. Thank you.
Councillor Pete.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick one, please, in relation to Councillor de Graaf's question. Can I just have clarification from the officers in relation to, we're putting this motion not to proceed with additional hand hygiene services, and it is possible that after Councillor Olsen's no-sum motion gets up and then a report comes back and perhaps we do approve additional hand sanitisers at that time, is there to be a duration of time between accepting this report and therefore amending the report with a new decision, or will it require a rescind motion? What's the actual procedural matter with this?
Through you, Mayor Thompson, the procedural matter on that one is that this resolution is written to be effective at this time. I think dot point 3, the last few words on it are at this time. So we're assuming that that relates to the COVID thing, timing. And then once it, if a report does come back to council, as per Councillor Olsen's norm, that report then, the resolution in that would then describe when any new actions would take place. So I don't believe a rescission motion would be required.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Just a question with regards to what we're spending, the 400,000 on financial impacts of COVID, and then on page 343, the hand hygiene services in public toilets. And I think most of us are fairly well aware that vandalism is, and some people's hygiene standards are far different to others. Do we have any idea of the costs of vandalism to the toilets? Because we've got another motion coming up, and I think if we had sufficient information, it would be helpful.
Through you, Mayor, if we could take that on notice, we will respond to you with that response.
Okay. Yeah, in other words, it's just that what we're doing in our hand hygiene services in public toilets, what's involved, I think that we'll take that on board for something later on. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I think as you'd be aware, Councillor Olsen has a motion coming forward which calls for a report, and I imagine that report would detail that information. Councillor de Graaf.
Sorry, I had one more question. Jade, would you mind explaining how the interest component works? Because I did have a resident actually bring this up to me quite a while ago, saying that the council actually makes money on the interest from rates, whereas if it was billed in a different way, then the ratepayer could potentially be having that interest. So I was just wondering if you could clarify it a little bit more.
So through you, Mayor Thompson, interest is budget. We budget for a component of interest from outstanding rates. So effectively, you could say that the ratepayer is receiving a benefit from it because we are taking that interest as a source of revenue and therefore not increasing rates to gain that revenue.
But that's because we charge the rates in advance rather than at the end of the year. Is that right? Is that why interest gets accrued?
If I may, through you, Mayor Thompson, no, we don't charge in advance. Rates become due each quarter. So, and the interest is charged on the amounts outstanding after they become due. So, under the Act, we have to charge that 2% per month. But it's only once those rates become due, and they only become due quarterly.
All right, yes, I should know that from my own rates bill. I've seen how it's charged. Thank you. So with this, though, it's just talking about 8 weeks past the extension date. And so if it adds up to $260,000, then it must be quite a lot of people who have actually asked for an extension in their time to pay. Like, do you have those numbers that it actually equates to that, or is this still just assuming that if it's a certain percentage? Because I thought we would actually know how many people who've actually applied to have their rates on hold.
Through you again, Mayor Thompson. Look, year on year, there is around $800,000 worth of interest and fines that we do recognise as revenue in our accounts. And the $260,000, I guess, is a portion of revenue that we're foregoing because we are not going to charge interest and rates during this period.
All right, it's an estimate as well, isn't it? Yep.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. My question is to the mover, if he would consider possibly, in light of the fact that we have a motion coming up in relation to dot point 3 here, and that the fact that dot point 3 is actually the status quo, could we get rid of dot point 3 from this motion to get rid of any question mark? It doesn't change the outcome because this is the status quo. Because potentially what we've got here is we're saying here as council that we've considered the financial impacts, and at this time, at the COVID time, it's not needed, but post-COVID it is needed.
Can I just clarify on page 343, it says, council may choose to alter this position at a later date.
I'm not saying just get rid of it. It doesn't change anything at all. It doesn't need to be in the motion at all.
It's up to you, Councillor Olsen. It would be required to be an amendment. It's too big a of a change. So if you think it's worthwhile, Councillor McMahon, is that you wishing to move an amendment? No. Councillor Olsen, would you like to close debate? We'll go to vote. All those in favour? That's carried. (9.8) is confidential items. Don't believe there's any updates to this report. Councillor Olsen wishing to move. Would you like to speak as the mover? Oh, sorry, this is the confidential items report relating to the release of confidential items. No. Councillor Peat wishing to move?
No, just a question, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
Your Worship, a number of times through the spreadsheets there, it mentions code of conduct and the need to retain in confidence, and I can understand that. But can I just ask the officer or someone, is there currently an outstanding code of conduct in relation to an elected member at all?
Through you, Mayor Thompson, there is no outstanding report that is required to be presented to council on a code of conduct.
Okay, thank you.
Is anyone wishing to move this motion? Councillor Greaves, would you like to speak to the motion? No. Councillor Jabberson wanting to second? Councillor Olsen, you've still got your button pressed. Are you interested in speaking or no? No, we'll go to vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Uh, 9.9 is the Council and Committee reporting schedule. I believe there is an update to this report.
Through you, Mayor Thompson, if members can refer to page 368 of the agenda. The EM session that is being scheduled for the 27th of October has been cancelled. For the SDC meeting of the 3rd of November, the draft Arts and Cultural Development Strategic Plan has been removed. For the council meeting of the 17th of November, we will be bringing forward the RVEC committee membership report. And for the RVEC meeting of the 30th of November, the value of LGA membership will actually be moved from that to the next council meeting of 17th of November.
Members, what is your wish? Would someone like to move? Councillor Greaves, would you like to speak as the mover? Is there a seconder for this motion? Deputy Mayor Eaton, would you like to speak? No, we'll go to vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Next item on the agenda is the questions on notice, and we have questions from Councillor Familiotis on service sharing and the LGA membership. And the answers are available here within this agenda and will also be in the minutes. Just to clarify, the LGA membership, as we just heard, we'll have a report on that at the next council meeting, and that breakdown of the benefits will be broken down in further detail than what you've got right now. We'll move on to motions on notice. We've already heard 11.1, so 11.2 is motion on notice from Councillor Olsen, hand sanitation for public toilets. Still happy to move that motion? Go ahead. Can you turn him on, please?
Just a change to that motion, if I could. Can I have that by December 2020, please? Now, because the previous COVID report had a lot of the data, so everything I'm kind of asking here, we have the data on the toilets, the cost for install, the maintenance, all that. It's not starting from scratch. So talking to the director responsible for this, is quite confident this could be achieved for the December meeting. So look, I've had quite a bit of feedback from the community regarding the lack of soap dispensers within our public toilets, and obviously heightened through COVID. And I think it's an expectation of the community now. I think our community expect this. I think there's a shift in the sanitation and the hygiene of people. And what this is asking for is a report to come back to looking at, those high use toilets, along our coastal paths, the coast of Vines, the Adventure Playground, Port Walunga, Wilfred Taylor Reserve Playgrounds, those high use facilities, to identify which one of those might actually be suitable for hand sanitation. And as Councillor Brown mentioned a little bit earlier, an understanding of what actual vandalism occurs in those, and perhaps run a trial, providing the costings that come back, if we're satisfied with that, for 6 months, 12 months, and actually see how that goes, because I think this is here to stay. I don't think this is going to go away anymore, and I think the community are more and more going to have an expectation of, soap within their public toilets. But let's start off with those high use areas rather than every single public toilet, and just see how this goes. That's the intent of this, but let's all get the information coming back in a report. We can make an informed decision. Legislation's a bit loose and airy-fairy, and I think even our interpretation's a little bit loose and airy-fairy, but, let's get all that information and make some informed decisions. And our community can see what we're making a decision on, whether we do or don't. But I think this is something which is going to be a high priority for our community and an expectation of a service level for council to provide. I hope you support this. Thank you.
Councillor Bray, wishing to second?
Yes, but I'd like, before doing that, would I be able to ask the mover be prepared to amend it with just a few extra words?
Go ahead and ask him.
I'm just wondering whether, based on the mover's own debate, I'm wondering whether on .4 it could be just changed a little, say, a strategy and timing for potentially installing hand sanitation to these high-use toilets, including the possibility of a trial in selected locations. And with the addition of those few words, I'd like to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Yes, sir. Do I get this? Oh, sorry.
I thought your debate was over, seeing as you sat down, but
sorry,
finished?
I was just waiting for the typing. I'm lazy, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, look, I can see both sides of this. I can see why the staff reached the conclusion they have, and also understand Councillor Olsen's point. I noticed while travelling around recently that across quite a few councils in South Australia and Queensland, it was pretty variable. In the bigger centres, there seemed to be less, and in the very small compact community centres, where you're talking maybe a more cohesive rural community, there was a lot more sanitisers in the public toilets, possibly because they don't suffer the same degree of vandalism that we may have to cope with as inevitably a city with a very varied social groupings. So a trial, I think, might be a way to see how we might go. Thanks.
Councillor Brown?
Do we know what other councils are doing? Something that we're in line of, we measure ourselves with Port Adelaide Enfield, they're a similar area, or adjoining Council Marion. Have we got any concept of what
sure, we'll learn more about that when the report comes back, but...
well, they can come back with that, that's fine.
Yeah.
We don't need to know it right now.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor de Graaf?
Thanks. I've got a couple of questions, so I just want to be careful these don't cross over into debate, because I would like to debate as well. I'm trying to understand what was in the report. So the difference between vandalism and cakes of soap going missing. So, yeah, I'm wondering if there could be some. I was understanding that bits of soap are actually just going missing. So that's different from vandalism. Can I get some comment on that?
Through you, Mayor Thompson, the types of vandalism that occur are soap dispensers being ripped off the walls and spread across the floors. So the detergent, if you like, being spread across the floors. Vandalism through ripping doors off or anything that's fixed, and generally graffiti and other things that probably don't want to talk about right now. So it's quite broad. What I'd like to do with this report, and I've taken some notes while discussions have been occurring, given the NOM is concentrating on high-use toilets, we would probably look to concentrate on those and try and provide you with a level of what sort of vandalism occurs generally, but then try and restrict into that actual topic that's being requested.
Yes.
So we'll provide all of that information as part of the report coming back.
So the high-use toilets, I take it, are the ones that haven't really been vandalised. So the ones that are being vandalised, they're the ones that council doesn't really want to put the soap into. So do you have a list of the suburbs that you're planning to actually service?
Through you, Mayor Thompson, the report will outline a high-use toilet from this, from our description, if you like, and it's probably good to get some clarity around that. Would be things like Whitten Centre, Jubilee Playground, Nash Walk at Moana, Waring Street, toilets at Waring Street. We also have some locations that are very seasonal, where you'll get higher usage in summer months, and we have that sort of data through obviously the amount of cleaning that we do in those. We can certainly provide that back.
All right, while I've got you here and we're discussing the toilets, I have had a group actually ask me about the toilets in Old Ranella, that there's never any soap in there. So I would hope that might be one of the ones that might get some soap. But also that it closes at 10 o'clock. And if they have meetings that are running later, I think it might have been closed earlier than that. But if there's a community group that's using those toilets and the meeting runs later than the toilets close, can the key potentially be left with a community group?
From my understanding, a lot of those are time closures from an automated system.
Okay.
So I'd need to have a look into that specific item if you'd like to provide me with the details at a later date.
Yeah, we'll do. Okay, so if I could do my debate, please. I would hope at some point or other that we could look into soap for the rest of the toilets that are around the regions as well. And because it depends on the level of vandalism, but if people are just taking soap because it's a low socioeconomic area and people are needing soap, if the council staff are going out to the toilets every 24 hours and checking on that place anyway, I wouldn't have thought just putting out a cake of soap while they're there would be a big deal. So I'd be very interested to see the results come back from this report, and hope that at some point it could be extended out to the rest of the toilets, or at least most of the rest of the toilets as well. I am in support of this though.
Councillor Brown.
I'll handle it out of the meeting, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Olsen. Would you like to close debate?
No, thank you.
Okay, we'll go to vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried unanimously. All right, we'll move on. There's no petitions. Is there any urgent business? No urgent business, so we'll move on to confidential items. Members, would someone like to move us into confidence for item 14.1? Thanks, Councillor Brown. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor de Graaf. All those in favour? That's carried and we'll close the meeting at 10:15.